The identity fracture method. They don't break your bones, they break your roles. This is the silent, invisible weapon. The tool so subtle, so profound, it fractures the very essence of who you think you are. It creeps in slowly, almost undetectably, until one day you wake up and realize you are loyal to a version of yourself that someone else carefully designed. This is the identity fracture method, a form of psychological and social engineering that rewrites the self without ever lifting a hand. Imagine for a moment your identity as a mosaic, shattered into countless pieces by the cracks of experience, belief, and social conditioning. Each piece represents a role you play: the child, the worker, the friend, the lover, the rebel, the caregiver, the skeptic. Normally, these shards fit together imperfectly but coherently, creating the whole picture of you. But what if someone slowly pries these pieces apart? What if the edges are filed down, reshaped, and the colors repainted until the mosaic no longer resembles the original image, but something alien? This isn't fiction or paranoia. It's a reality as old as civilization itself. Throughout history, the most powerful rulers, institutions, and movements have weaponized identity itself. Instead of breaking bones or destroying bodies, they break roles, fracturing the ways people see themselves, their purpose, and their loyalties. Consider the cult leader who doesn't just demand obedience, but reshapes a follower's sense of self. They isolate, confuse, and gradually replace old roles with new ones crafted to serve the cult's agenda. The once independent thinker becomes the devoted disciple. The questioning mind transforms into a singular, unquestioning voice. This process can take months or years, but the end result is the same: identity fracture followed by reconstruction. Or, look at oppressive regimes throughout history. Their most insidious tactic isn't brute force alone. It's the erasure and rewriting of identities. They dismantle the roles people hold in their communities: worker, parent, intellectual, and replace them with roles dictated by ideology or fear. The person who once felt pride in their craft now feels shame or futility. The citizen who once believed in justice becomes a silent observer of injustice. Slowly, loyalty shifts from the self to the imposed narrative. On a smaller but equally devastating scale, toxic relationships use the same method. The abuser doesn't need to raise a fist. They dismantle the victim's roles with constant gaslighting, manipulation, and emotional erosion. A partner who once trusted their instincts and desires begins to doubt every thought. The confident individual turns into a shadow of doubt and compliance, fragmented between the self they once knew and the self the abuser molds. This fracturing works because identity is never static. It is fluid, shaped by experiences, relationships, and context. When those influences are weaponized, the self becomes a battlefield. Every role, every piece of identity is vulnerable to influence and fracture. But why does this method work so effectively? Because it targets the very framework we use to navigate reality. Our roles are the lenses through which we interpret the world and ourselves. When those lenses crack, reality warps. We no longer see ourselves clearly, and the world becomes a place of confusion, fear, and dependence. Take the example of someone raised in a rigid environment that demands obedience above all else. From childhood, their role as an independent thinker is suppressed. Instead, they learn to be the compliant child. This role becomes the foundation of their identity. As they grow, any attempt to express individuality or dissent is punished or ridiculed. Over time, this fractures their sense of self so deeply that when they leave that environment, they struggle to redefine who they are beyond obedience. Contrast this with the transformative power of reclaiming fractured roles. When individuals become aware of how their identity was shaped or fractured, they can begin to piece themselves back together. This process is neither easy nor quick. It demands courage to face the fractured roles, the confused feelings, the false loyalties, the internal conflicts. Healing begins with awareness, recognizing the subtle shifts in self-definition, the internalized voices that are not truly your own, and the patterns of compliance and fracture. It is like untangling a web woven tightly around your essence. A powerful example is survivors of cults or abusive relationships. Their stories often speak of a long, painful journey back to the self, a process of reclaiming lost roles and shedding imposed identities. They learn to differentiate between who they were forced to become and who they truly are. In that reclamation, they find power, freedom, and authenticity. On a societal level, this method reveals the fragility of collective identities, how social roles can be manipulated to divide or control entire populations. Propaganda works by redefining social roles. The enemy becomes the threat. The loyal citizen becomes the suppressor. The dissenting voice becomes a traitor. Identities fracture not just individually, but collectively, making societies vulnerable to manipulation. The identity fracture method is more than a psychological tactic. It is a weapon of control. Unlike visible violence, it leaves no scars that can be pointed to easily. It disguises itself as persuasion, as culture, as education, even as love or protection. It whispers in the spaces between certainty and doubt, reshaping your roles until your loyalty is no longer to yourself, but to the fractured version created for you. This is why awareness is crucial. To resist the fracture, you must understand how identity is constructed, how roles are formed and shifted. You must question the narratives that define who you are, whether from family, society, or internalized fears. You must hold fast to the core pieces of self that resonate with truth, even when they feel weak or isolated. In the end, the greatest act of rebellion is to reclaim your fractured roles, to rebuild the mosaic with pieces chosen by you, not by others, to hold on to the self that was never meant to be broken. So when you feel the slow, creeping shift in your perception of self, when loyalty feels confused or misplaced, remember this: they don't need to break your bones, they break your roles. And to fight back, you must first recognize the fracture. The soft threat principle: they never say the words out loud, not once. They never say, "I'll leave." Instead, they use a silent weapon, more powerful and insidious: the look. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in their expression that sends your nervous system into panic. The soft threat principle is a manipulation so quiet, it slips beneath your conscious awareness and yet hits you deeply, planting fear, doubt, and obedience in the shadows of your mind. Imagine someone you care about suddenly casting you a look heavy with disappointment. Not angry, not shouting, just quiet, aching disappointment. Your heart tightens, your breath falters. You can feel it instantly, a primal jolt of fear rising from the core of your being. You don't hear the threat. You don't need to. The silence speaks louder than any words could. It says, "You're close to losing me." And your nervous system fires on all cylinders, scanning for danger, scrambling for safety. This fear is ancient and visceral. Humans evolved in tight social groups where exclusion meant death. The brain's alarm bells ring loudly at even the faintest hint of abandonment. The soft threat principle exploits this wiring flawlessly. It triggers an emotional shutdown before reason can intervene. No words to challenge, no direct conflict, just a silent message that you might be cast aside if you don't comply. Why does this work so effectively? Because ambiguity forces your brain to fill in the blanks. The look of disappointment becomes a terrifying riddle. Is the person really going to leave? Will the bond break? Your mind runs wild, projecting all your insecurities onto that look. The uncertainty fuels anxiety and an urgent need to fix what might have gone wrong, even if you don't know what it is. This tactic is a masterclass in emotional control. Unlike overt threats, which can be confronted or denied, the soft threat is intangible, slippery, impossible to pin down. It seeps into your awareness and silently reshapes your behavior. Over time, it teaches you to avoid conflict, to walk on eggshells, to shrink yourself in order to stay safe. Consider a relationship where one partner never explicitly threatens to leave, but frequently offers that look, a silent disappointment that cuts deeper than any argument. The other partner becomes hypervigilant, endlessly adjusting their behavior, sacrificing needs and desires to avoid triggering that look again. This is not love, it is control wrapped in silence. This principle is also weaponized in workplaces, families, and friendships. A manager's disappointed gaze after a missed deadline, a parent's cold stare when a child fails expectations, a friend's subtle withdrawal without explanation, all wield this silent threat. The target becomes trapped in a cycle of guilt, fear, and compliance, striving desperately to restore approval. On the neurological level, this manipulation hijacks the body's survival systems. The ambiguity activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, or freeze response. But With no explicit threat to fight or run from, and no words to clarify, the body often defaults to freeze. Paralysis grips the victim. They become emotionally immobilized, overwhelmed by anxiety, unable to speak or act freely. Polyvagal theory helps explain this. The dorsal vagal complex triggers shutdown when the nervous system senses an ambiguous threat it cannot escape. This ancient defense mechanism was designed for life or death moments, but is now exploited in emotional arenas. The victim complies not from choice, but from terror of loss, caught in a survival loop. The long-term effects are devastating. Chronic exposure to the soft threat principle fosters anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and emotional exhaustion. Victims internalize blame, believing they caused the disappointment and must repair it. But this is a trap. The true harm lies in the silent control, the unspoken demands, the denial of honest communication. Breaking free requires clarity and courage. Awareness is the first weapon against this invisible threat. Recognizing that disappointment can be wielded as a weapon, not an innocent emotion, is critical. Naming the pattern allows victims to reclaim power and refuse unconscious compliance. Direct communication disrupts the cycle. Asking questions like, "Are you going to leave?" or "Can we talk about what you're feeling?" pierces the ambiguity. Though difficult, demanding honesty forces the manipulator to either speak clearly or reveal their true intentions, breaking the grip of fear. This principle operates in everyday life with profound subtlety. Picture a child sensing a parent's disappointed look and instantly feeling shame, even though no words were spoken. This silent conditioning molds obedience and fear, leaving emotional scars that can persist into adulthood. In friendships, a withdrawn gaze or silent disappointment becomes a weapon of social control. The friend is left guessing, anxious to avoid offending, desperate for approval. The relationship becomes unbalanced, fragile, governed by fear of triggering invisible punishments. The soft threat principle exploits humanity's deepest need, belonging. The threat of loss never needs to be explicit. Its mere suggestion is enough to maintain control. It builds a cage of silence and shadows, where fear rules and voice is silenced. This principle is the opposite of healthy connection. Genuine disappointment invites dialogue, empathy, and repair. The soft threat weaponizes disappointment, turning it into a tool of domination and fear. Silence in the face of disappointment breeds confusion and spiraling anxiety. It creates a feedback loop in which the victim's mind cycles through worst-case scenarios, unable to find peace or certainty. More extreme forms, like ghosting or the silent treatment, are brutal applications of the same principle. They wield absence and silence as weapons to provoke maximum fear of loss, without explanation or closure. Yet, this power is not absolute. Humans possess resilience and agency. Developing emotional literacy, setting boundaries, and insisting on clear communication dismantle this silent weapon's control. Therapy and self-work help victims identify these subtle threats and their bodily responses. Practices like mindfulness, grounding, and assertiveness empower people to respond from strength, not freeze. Ultimately, the soft threat principle reveals a dark truth about human interaction: how silence, disappointment, and unspoken fear can be manipulated into tools of control. It highlights the vital importance of honesty, empathy, and clarity in breaking cycles of fear. In a world where power is often exerted without words, learning to see the silent threats is a radical act of survival. The softest threats can cause the deepest wounds, yet awareness and courage illuminate a path to freedom. That look of disappointment that whispers, "I might leave," is a weapon aimed at your survival instincts. It calls for obedience wrapped in silence, but it is not your truth. Your worth is not measured by another's silent threat. You can break free from the shadows of unspoken fear, reclaim your voice, your boundaries, and your dignity. This is the soft threat principle, the quiet shadow that lurks beneath smiles and silent rooms. Now that you know it, you hold the power to choose how you respond, not with fear, but with strength. Consent loop engineering. They start small. A simple question, a casual request. Nothing that would make you hesitate, just a tiny yes. But that tiny yes is a crack, the first fracture in your personal boundary. Consent loop. Engineering is the subtle art of building compliance piece by piece until your agreement is no longer a conscious choice, but a shadow of past acquiescence, a relentless echo of everything you said yes to before. Imagine this. Someone asks you to borrow a pen. You say yes. It feels natural, harmless, even polite. But then they ask to borrow your notebook. You hesitate. It's more personal, more valuable. But you remember the pen. You already said yes once. Saying no now feels awkward, even disloyal. That is the power of the consent loop. The initial yes becomes the anchor, the psychological foothold that makes every next yes easier, until you're deep in agreement on things you never fully wanted. This isn't just a trick of manners or politeness. It's a precise psychological dynamic rooted in what scientists call the foot-in-the-door phenomenon. The term refers to the tendency of people who agree to a small request to later comply with larger requests, simply because their previous compliance shifts their internal self-perception. Each yes changes how you see yourself, not just in that moment, but cumulatively, over time. Every small agreement accumulates into a new version of yourself, a version that's more agreeable, more compliant, less likely to resist. The loop builds on itself until the original choice, your agency, dissolves into a chain of momentum. You start saying yes because you said yes before. But that momentum has its own inertia, its own force, and it moves you forward whether you want to or not. Think about the impact this has in real life, in relationships, workplaces, and social dynamics. It's often invisible, operating beneath awareness. You don't see the trap because it's made of your own consent, pieced together in moments too small to register. Let's take an example from the workplace. A new employee is asked to take on a minor task outside their job description. They say yes, wanting to make a good impression. Later, a slightly bigger task comes along, again outside the original scope. Again, they say yes because I already said yes before. Over weeks or months, those tiny concessions add up. The employee is now doing far more than what was agreed, trapped in a consent loop engineered by subtle expectations and social pressure. Now, it's not just about politeness. The loop plays on deeper psychological mechanisms. Cognitive dissonance, self-justification, and the desire to appear consistent. When you say yes once, your brain wants to avoid the discomfort of looking inconsistent by saying no later. You start to align your attitudes and beliefs with your past behavior. The effect is profound. Your internal narrative shifts to justify the path your compliance has taken. Suddenly, what began as a small yes becomes part of your identity. You are the person who agrees. You are the person who complies. The power of consent loop engineering lies in how it hijacks your identity, your sense of self. It erodes the boundaries between voluntary and coerced, between choice and obligation. And once those boundaries are broken, the loop feeds on itself, becoming stronger, more relentless, until your agency is reduced to a faint whisper beneath the roar of cumulative yeses. This principle isn't limited to personal interactions. It's weaponized in marketing, politics, and social manipulation. Advertisers start by getting you to agree to a simple survey, then a newsletter sign-up, then a small purchase. Each yes makes the next easier until you're caught in a cycle of ongoing commitment. Memberships, subscriptions, loyalty programs, all engineered through carefully crafted consent loops. The same principle applies to propaganda and political persuasion. Your first nudge to agree with small, seemingly harmless statements. Over time, these build into larger ideological commitments. Your mental gates slowly open wider with every incremental yes, until you find yourself endorsing positions you might have rejected outright at first. Let's consider the psychological toll this takes. The person caught in a consent loop may feel confusion, frustration, and even self-betrayal. They wonder how they ended up agreeing to things they never intended. The answer is in the slow drip of consent. The loop blurs the line between choice and compulsion, making it nearly impossible to break free without conscious effort and awareness. Awareness is the key. Recognizing the loop means seeing that your yes isn't a one-time event, but a process. It means pausing before the next agreement, asking, am I really choosing this or just following a chain of past consents? This awareness empowers you to reclaim your agency. It allows you to step out of the loop, break the momentum, and make choices aligned with your true desires, not just the echoes of past compliance. Breaking free is not easy. The loop is reinforced by social expectations, guilt, and the desire for harmony. But it's possible. By practicing self-reflection, setting clear boundaries, and learning to say no without fear or apology. When you say no consciously and clearly, you reset the loop. You reassert your power and control over your own decisions. In a world designed to wear down resistance through incremental demands, understanding consent, loop engineering is more than useful. It's essential. It's a defense against losing yourself in the endless tide of obligation. A tool to safeguard your autonomy and preserve your integrity. So, next time you hear a small request, pause. Look beneath the surface. Understand the architecture of consent being built around you. Your freedom depends not on the absence of requests, but on your ability to see the loops before they close, and to say yes or no, truly, deliberately, and on your own terms. Because every consent you give is a thread in the web of your life, and you are the weaver. The freeze and please trick, they call it the freeze and please trick. At first glance, it might seem simple, almost too simple, to wield such power over someone's mind. But beneath this simplicity lies a deeply unsettling mechanism of control, a psychological snare so effective it can bend the will of the strongest, the most determined, until compliance becomes automatic. This trick works by overwhelming you emotionally, pushing you into a state where your natural instincts shut down, where your body locks up and your mind goes numb. It exploits the freeze response, that primal reaction buried deep within every human being, a survival mechanism hardwired over millions of years. But here's the cruel twist. The freeze response, instead of protecting you, becomes the gateway to your control. In that moment of paralysis, your free will doesn't just pause, it's hijacked. Your next move isn't a spontaneous choice. It is their implanted command, echoing through your mind, waiting for you to act. Imagine a moment where someone confronts you, their words sharp, their tone unforgiving. Their barrage is relentless, a tidal wave of accusations, insults, or demands. Your heart races, your breath shortens, you feel trapped. You try to respond, but find your body betraying you, frozen in place, unable to speak or resist. This is no accident. It's a calculated method designed to shut down your fight or flight instincts and replace them with a suffocating compliance. The please part is the soft whisper in the storm. After the emotional storm overwhelms you, after your mind slips into that freeze, they lean in and say, please. The word is disarming, gentle. It breaks through the emotional fog. It is a command wrapped in a plea, a subtle but powerful signal that nudges you to obey, to acquiesce. You want to please them because your body, frozen and vulnerable, craves safety and release from the torment. Let's dive deeper into the biology of this freeze. The freeze response is part of the autonomic nervous system's defense mechanism, alongside fight and flight. When danger looms, your body prepares for action. You either fight back or flee. But if neither is possible, your brain triggers freeze. Muscles stiffen. Breathing slows. Time seems to dilate. It's a state of hypervigilance mixed with immobilization. In this suspended moment, your brain minimizes movement to avoid detection or harm, much like a deer caught in headlights. But when the freeze and please trick is deployed, this evolutionary survival tool becomes a psychological cage. Because while your body is frozen, your mind becomes highly suggestible. It's a vulnerability exploited by manipulators who understand that a frozen person is easier to control than a fighting or fleeing one. Consider real-life examples where this is painfully evident. Victims of emotional abuse often describe moments where their partner's rage or coldness becomes unbearable, and they literally feel paralyzed, unable to respond. The abuser unleashes a barrage of emotional torment, watching as their victim freezes, then softens when they hear a sudden, "Please, just listen." That one word becomes a leash tightening around their will, conditioning them to obey in hopes of ending the freeze. This isn't just about romantic relationships. It happens in workplaces where a superior uses intimidation, overwhelming pressure, or emotional outbursts to freeze employees. After the storm, a seemingly polite request, "Please finish this by tonight," becomes a demand the victim feels powerless to refuse. The freeze immobilizes their resistance. The please demands their action. On a deeper psychological level, this trick exploits our inherent desire for social acceptance and harmony. When faced with overwhelming negative emotion, our instinct isn't just survival, it's connection. We want to reduce conflict to restore peace. When frozen, our brain seeks a way out, a path to end the tension. The please becomes a beacon of hope, a bridge to restore that fractured connection. But the danger lies in how that beacon is weaponized to make us compliant against our own best interests. This tactic also intersects with dissociation. The freeze response can lead to dissociative states, where victims mentally disconnect from their body or situation. During these moments, the sense of self erodes, making it easier for the manipulator to implant commands. The victim's next action is no longer a product of their conscious will, but a reaction to the manipulator's subtle cues. It's a covert form of control that can leave long-lasting scars on identity and autonomy. Understanding this mechanism is the first step to breaking free. Recognizing when you are being pushed into a freeze state allows you to ground yourself. Techniques such as controlled breathing, sensory focus, or even mentally naming your emotions can help disrupt the freeze. It restores agency. When you feel overwhelmed, remind yourself that the freeze is a temporary state, a biological reflex, not your permanent condition. The next time you hear a please following emotional overwhelm, question it. Is this a genuine request or a subtle manipulation? Your compliance should never be an automatic reaction to frozen fear. In relationships, workplaces, or any power dynamic, awareness is your shield. Understanding the freeze and please trick exposes the invisible chains manipulators use to trap you. It reveals how emotional overwhelm is weaponized to silence resistance and implant commands. But knowledge alone isn't enough. You must practice reclaiming your voice in those frozen moments. Start small. Breathe deeply, ground your senses, and assert your right to pause and respond on your terms. Over time, these acts become your armor, weakening the trick's grip. Finally, let's reflect on why this trick feels so insidious. It doesn't rely on overt force. It doesn't need physical violence. Instead, it hijacks something essential within us, the instinct to protect ourselves through stillness and connection. It transforms our survival biology into a tool for control, making the victim complicit in their own compliance. The freeze and please trick is a reminder of how vulnerability, when exploited, can become the battlefield for power. But it's also a call to resilience, because within every freeze, there lies the potential for awakening. The moment you recognize the trick, you shatter its power. Your next move becomes truly yours again. Free, conscious, and unchained. The false reflection trap. They say the eyes are windows to the soul, but what if those windows were mirrors instead? What if someone didn't see you for who you truly are, but chose to reflect only the parts of yourself you desperately want to believe exist, only enough to feel like a soulmate, a perfect match, a safe harbor? This is the trap of the false reflection, a psychological snare so subtle, so elegantly deceptive that it can shatter your sense of reality without a single harsh word or obvious betrayal. Imagine meeting someone who seems to know you better than you know yourself. They echo your laughter, share your favorite obscure references, match your energy with uncanny precision. Your vulnerabilities, your dreams, your fears, they don't just listen, they seem to embody them. It feels like you found a mirror to your soul. But here's the dark secret. This mirror is cracked. It's a costume crafted to draw you in, to lure your guard down, and to rewrite the script of your emotional world. This isn't connection. It's calculated mimicry. Why would anyone do this? The answer lies in the power of psychological influence and control. Humans are wired to seek patterns and familiarity. Our brains crave validation, comfort, and recognition. When we see parts of ourselves reflected back, a profound chemical cocktail of oxytocin and dopamine floods our system. This flood rewires our brain's reward center, making the other person a source of emotional high, even if the feelings are not genuine. Manipulators exploit this, weaving a tapestry of false intimacy that feels more real than truth. Take, for example, the story of Maya. She met him at a gallery opening, someone who shared her love for surrealist art and obscure jazz records. At first, it was uncanny how perfectly he echoed her thoughts and feelings, often finishing her sentences or recalling minute details she rarely shared. She felt seen, truly seen, in a way she never had before. But slowly the mask began to slip. His empathy was selective, a tool to disarm her. When conflicts arose, he twisted her own words back at her, weaponizing her vulnerabilities. That initial reflection, which had seemed so genuine, was nothing but a trap, a reflection that only served his agenda. This phenomenon is not limited to romantic relationships. It can occur in friendships, family dynamics, workplaces, even in online interactions. The false reflection trap is a tactic of emotional camouflage. The impersonator doesn't just mimic surface traits. They study your values, your pain points, your aspirations. They weave themselves into your identity by becoming a distorted echo, blurring the line between self and other. Over time, this creates confusion, self-doubt, and a fractured sense of identity in the victim. How does this work neurologically? When we feel understood, our brains release neurotransmitters that enhance trust and bonding. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone, surges, creating a sense of safety and closeness. This biological response is evolutionary. It kept ancient humans bonded to protect against predators. But when exploited by a manipulator, it becomes a double-edged sword. The victim's brain associates this person with safety, despite contradictory signals. Cognitive dissonance sets in. Your logical mind senses deception, but your emotional brain clings to the familiarity of the reflected self. There's also the role of mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else perform it. These neurons create empathy and social understanding. A skilled manipulator can consciously or unconsciously engage these neurons by mirroring your gestures, speech patterns, and emotional rhythms. It creates a feedback loop of connection that feels intimate and effortless. But behind this biological dance lies a calculated intent to disarm and control. Consider the chilling example of cult leaders who use this technique on their followers. They echo their hopes and fears, dress their rhetoric in familiar language, and mirror their emotional states. This creates a seductive sense of belonging and identity. Followers lose themselves, believing the cult leader is the only one who truly understands them. This false reflection becomes a prison, a mental cage forged by empathy weaponized. The false reflection trap also feeds on the universal human fear of loneliness. In a world fragmented by technology and isolation, the promise of a soulmate who mirrors your very being is intoxicating. It's the emotional equivalent of finding an oasis in a desert. But this oasis may be a mirage, leading you deeper into emotional dehydration rather than quenching your thirst. How can one protect against this subtle form of manipulation? Awareness is the first shield. Understand that true connection doesn't just mirror, but complements and challenges. Genuine relationships encourage growth, respect boundaries, and acknowledge imperfections. They don't reflect only your ideal self, but embrace your whole being, including the shadows you hesitate to show. Secondly, listen to the quiet signals beneath the surface. Does this reflection vanish when tested by conflict or vulnerability? Is their empathy consistent, or does it fade like a shadow when you need it most? Does their presence feel like a mirror or like a mask that shifts with your moods? These questions are vital because the false reflection often dissolves under pressure, revealing cracks in the facade. It's also crucial to maintain your own sense of identity outside of relationships. When your self-worth is tied too tightly to another's reflection, you become vulnerable to losing yourself entirely. Cultivate self-awareness, invest in your passions, and nurture relationships that affirm your autonomy. True connection empowers rather than consumes. Finally, seek perspective. Sometimes the false reflection trap is so immersive that it clouds judgment. Trusted friends, therapists, or mentors can offer clarity and help discern authenticity from illusion. They provide mirrors untainted by manipulation, reflecting your true worth without distortion. The danger of the false reflection trap lies not in overt deception, but in the slow erosion of your emotional boundaries, your sense of self, and your trust in your own perception. It's a silent thief, stealing pieces of your identity while you're distracted by the allure of being truly seen. In the end, the mirror you seek must be one that shows you as you are, not just who you hope to be. Because only in that raw, imperfect truth can genuine connection take root. And only there can your heart be truly safe. Remember, the next time someone feels too much like a reflection, ask yourself, are you seeing a soulmate or just a masterful illusion? The answer might just save you from the most intimate form of betrayal, the false reflection trap. The implanted regret loop. They make you believe you ruined something precious, even if you didn't. This is the heart of the implanted regret loop, a psychological trap so subtle, so insidious, it wraps itself around your mind and refuses to let go. It's not about physical chains or locked doors. The prison is within you, built from guilt, shame, and the relentless replaying of what you are made to believe is your failure. They don't have to imprison you. They've trained you to do it yourself. Imagine a moment in your life that should be filled with joy, with connection, with possibility. Instead, it becomes a shadowed memory, twisted by a whisper that says, "You ruined it." Maybe it's a friendship that fell apart, a relationship that ended, a missed opportunity. But the truth? You may never have truly been at fault. Yet, through words, silence, or actions, someone else has sown doubt so deeply that you carry the blame alone. This implanted regret is a weapon wielded by manipulators who understand the power of guilt to paralyze. Guilt is a complex emotion. It can be a signal to correct mistakes, to make amends, to grow. But when weaponized, it becomes a cage, a loop that traps you in endless self-recrimination. The more you try to escape it, the deeper you sink, replaying every moment, every choice, magnifying every perceived flaw. Why does this work so well? Because guilt strikes at your core identity. It asks you to believe that your worth is tied to your mistakes. It creates a narrative where you are the villain, the destroyer of something precious, and only your endless penance can bring forgiveness or peace. This story is a lie, but it feels real because it's repeated relentlessly until your own mind accepts it as truth. Think of a person trapped in this loop. They recall an argument, a failure, or a moment of hurt. Their mind rewinds again and again, dissecting every word and action. They ask themselves, what could I have done differently? Was it my fault? The answers don't bring clarity. They bring more pain. The loop spins faster, fueled by self-doubt and remorse. This mental prison stops you from moving forward. It freezes your growth and chains your emotions. Every new opportunity is weighed down by the fear of repeating the ruin. Relationships are shadowed by old wounds, where past mistakes loom larger than present joys. The loop is self-sustaining. Guilt feeds regret. Regret deepens guilt, and the cycle tightens its grip. The manipulator doesn't need to constantly remind you of your faults. The implanted regret works silently within your psyche, an internalized voice that constantly undermines your confidence. Sometimes, the manipulator may even deny wrongdoing while you remain trapped in the narrative they planted. This dissociation between external denial and internal torment creates confusion and deepens the loop. In relationships, this looks like subtle blame shifting or gaslighting. "You ruined what we had" might never be said directly, but is implied in looks, in silence, in accusations disguised as concern. You absorb this, rewiring your mind to shoulder the blame. Even if you try to speak up, the implanted regret makes you question your own perspective. Was it really your fault? Maybe if you just tried harder. This technique isn't limited to romantic relationships. In families, workplaces, friendships, anyone with power over you can plant this seed of regret. A boss who blames you for a failed project without cause, a parent who reminds you of past mistakes as evidence of your inadequacy, a friend who distances themselves and lets you believe you're the cause. Neurologically, guilt activates brain regions linked with social pain and self-reflection. It lights up the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, areas that process both physical pain and emotional distress. This overlap explains why guilt feels like a wound, something you carry in your body, not just your mind. The implanted regret loop exploits this by keeping those brain regions overactive, perpetuating suffering. The chronic stress caused by this loop leads to anxiety, depression, and lowered self-esteem. Victims become exhausted by their own minds, trapped in a prison of remorse with no key. They may isolate themselves, fearing further damage or rejection. The loop rewires neural pathways, creating patterns of negative thinking that become automatic and hard to break. Breaking free from the implanted regret loop demands deep self-awareness and radical compassion for yourself. The first step is to recognize that this regret was implanted, not born from your true actions or intentions. Naming the manipulation strips it of some of its power. It also requires learning to reframe your memories. Instead of replaying the scenario as a catastrophic failure, you begin to see it as a moment in a larger story, one with complexity, nuance, and human imperfection. You give yourself permission to be flawed, to learn, and to grow. Therapeutic tools like cognitive behavioral therapy help disrupt the loop by challenging distorted beliefs and developing healthier narratives. Mindfulness practices allow you to observe regret without being consumed by it. Journaling, speaking with trusted friends, and professional support all create pathways out of the cycle. Examples abound. A person haunted by a breakup might believe they destroyed a perfect relationship, endlessly blaming themselves for things beyond their control. Over time, they learn to see that relationships involve two people, that mistakes are mutual, and that blame doesn't heal. This shift begins to loosen the loop. In workplaces, an employee unfairly blamed for a team's failure internalizes regret, lowering confidence and performance. When leadership acknowledges systemic issues and supports the individual, the loop breaks and growth resumes. Families are complicated. A child told they ruined their parents' life might carry that guilt for decades. Therapy can help disentangle truth from imposed blame, allowing healing and self-forgiveness. The implanted regret loop is a cruel cycle of internalized punishment. It thrives on your silence, your doubt, your compassion turned inward against yourself. But the loop is not inevitable. Awareness, support, and intentional reframing empower you to reclaim your narrative. No one is perfect. No one destroys without cause. The precious things in your life are rarely broken by one moment or mistake. They are complex, fragile, but also resilient. Holding yourself hostage to implanted regret is a lie that must be challenged. You have the power to end the loop, to free yourself from guilt that was never truly yours, to forgive yourself not because you need permission, but because you deserve peace. The prison they built with your regret can be dismantled brick by brick, thought by thought, moment by moment. Step into your strength, reclaim your worth, and break the implanted regret loop forever. The DNA Reverence Hack. They invoke your roots, your ancestors, your bloodline, turning your heritage into a weapon to control your behavior in the name of tradition. The DNA Reverence Hack is subtle, powerful, and deeply woven into the fabric of human societies across time. It is not just about pride or belonging. It is about tapping into the primal, almost sacred sense of identity that connects you to those who came before you. This connection, when manipulated, becomes a tool to bend your will, to shape your choices, and to keep you locked into patterns you might never question. Think about the stories your family told you growing up, the tales of bravery, sacrifice, and honor carried through generations. These stories are not mere entertainment. They are coded messages that tap into something far deeper. The reverence you hold for your lineage, the silent agreement to uphold the legacy of your bloodline. This is the essence of the DNA Reverence Hack. It triggers your nervous system to respond, not just intellectually, but viscerally. Your identity becomes fused with the expectations and judgments of your ancestors, whether real or imagined. When someone wields this hack against you, they don't need to threaten you overtly. They don't need to say, do this or else. Instead, they remind you of what your family, your tribe, your culture would think of you if you stray. They appeal to an ancient wiring, a deep-rooted survival instinct. Belonging to your group is safety, rejection is danger, and the cost of rejection is framed not just socially, but spiritually. Are you betraying the sacrifices of those before you? Are you dishonoring your ancestors? These are not empty words. They activate a profound fear of loss, the loss of identity, the loss of meaning, the loss of connection to something greater than yourself. Imagine a young person in a tightly knit community raised with strict codes about how to behave, who to marry, what to believe. When they start to question these codes, they aren't just challenging rules, they are challenging the very essence of their being as defined by generations before. The DNA Reverence Hack makes rebellion not just risky, but existentially painful. The person feels as if by breaking away, they are tearing a part of their own soul, abandoning the blood that runs through their veins. This manipulation extends far beyond family and culture. Political movements, religious institutions, even corporations tap into this reverence. They craft narratives that tie loyalty and obedience to ancestral honor or national pride. This is why slogans often invoke our forefathers, our heritage, or the spirit of our people. It's a calculated move to bypass rational debate and activate emotional obedience. Your behavior becomes not a choice, but a duty etched in your DNA. Consider historical examples. Throughout history, conquerors and rulers have demanded allegiance framed as loyalty to a shared bloodline or nation. Propaganda often features imagery of ancestors and heroic founders, stirring pride and fear simultaneously. The DNA Reverence Hack in these contexts suppresses dissent. Who dares question the path laid out by generations? Who would risk being branded a traitor to their blood? This psychological leverage has fueled countless wars, persecutions, and social control mechanisms. Even on a personal level, the hack manifests in families as pressure to conform, to follow in the footsteps of parents or grandparents, to pursue the family business, or to uphold traditions even when they cause harm. It's a silent force that asks you to sacrifice your individuality for the perceived good of the lineage, and it often disguises itself as love and respect, making it difficult to recognize as control. The power of the DNA Reverence Hack lies in its invisibility. It is rarely articulated directly. Instead, it lives in the undercurrents of conversation, in the sighs of disappointment, in the sideways glances that say, "You should know better." It's the weight of unspoken expectations that press down on your shoulders, urging compliance without coercion. This subtlety is what makes it so effective and so dangerous. Breaking free from this hack requires more than rebellion. It demands a redefinition of identity beyond inherited narratives. It means recognizing that your worth and your path are not predetermined by your bloodline. This is not a rejection of ancestry, but a reclaiming of agency. You honor your roots by understanding them critically, by choosing which parts serve your growth and which parts bind you unnecessarily. In modern times, this hack often manifests through social media and cultural discourse, where identity politics can weaponize heritage. People are pitted against each other with appeals to ancestral suffering or glory, stoking division and obedience to group ideologies. It can trap entire generations in cycles of inherited grievance or entitlement, limiting individual freedom and collective progress. The DNA Reverence Hack exploits the fundamental human need for connection, belonging, and meaning. It hijacks the ancient neural circuits that regulate social bonding and survival. Once activated, it can override reason, making you act out of fear of losing your place in the lineage rather than out of true personal conviction. This is why it is so hard to resist, because it's not just a mental struggle, it's a biological imperative, a fight to maintain your identity in the face of potential erasure. So, next time you feel the heavy pull of tradition urging you toward a certain path, pause and ask, whose voice is this really? Is it yours, or is it a ghost from the past shaping your present? The DNA Reverence Hack is powerful, but it is not absolute. Awareness is the first step toward reclaiming your freedom, your choices, and ultimately, your life. Understanding this hack is more than an academic exercise. It's a matter of personal liberation. It's the key to breaking cycles of inherited limitation and fear, because your heritage, your bloodline, your ancestors, they are not just chains. They are also roots. And like any roots, they can nourish or bind. The choice is yours to make. In the end, the DNA Reverence Hack reveals the intricate dance between identity, control, and freedom, a dance that is played out in every culture and every generation. Recognizing it allows you to step off the predetermined stage and write your own script, honoring the past without being imprisoned by it. This is the profound journey from inherited obedience to conscious autonomy, a transformation that reshapes not only your life, but the legacy you leave behind. The morality tilt. They never come out and say it outright. They never stand before you and declare, "This is wrong." Instead, they choose a more subtle approach, one that infiltrates your very sense of right and wrong without a single word of condemnation. They tilt your internal compass slowly, imperceptibly, so gradually that you don't even realize your sense of morality is shifting. What was once clear and steadfast begins to blur, until what you once recognized as wrong no longer triggers the same alarms. It becomes something else entirely, something necessary, something tied to survival. This is the essence of the morality tilt, a psychological and emotional manipulation so profound it rewires the way you understand yourself and the world. It's not about forcing you to do something blatantly immoral. It's about shifting your entire framework so that you begin to believe the wrong is actually the path to survival. The lines between right and wrong, good and bad, fade into a shadowy gray where survival becomes the highest, most sacred principle. And survival, in this twisted worldview, feels like worship. Imagine a child growing up in an environment where harshness is disguised as love, where control is dressed up as care. They don't hear, "What you're feeling is unacceptable." Instead, the message is subtle, whispered in the way their caretaker shifts gaze, the way silence falls after a mistake. Over years, that child's internal moral compass is nudged, tilted inch by inch. What once felt like natural boundaries dissolves into survival mechanisms. To protect oneself, to avoid pain, to gain approval becomes more important than the clear rules of right and wrong. The child learns to worship survival itself, the smallest flicker of safety, because it feels like the only way to exist. This happens in relationships too, often without the victims even realizing it. In an abusive dynamic, the abuser rarely says, "What I'm doing is right." Instead, they erode their partner's sense of self and ethics with subtle actions: a raised eyebrow, a sigh of disappointment, a moment of coldness. Slowly, the partner's moral compass shifts. Behaviors that once felt wrong become acceptable, because challenging the abuser threatens survival, peace, or emotional safety. The victim begins to associate survival with pleasing the abuser, with walking on eggshells, with silent worship of the volatile peace that keeps the storm at bay. The morality tilt is deeply effective because it attacks the foundation of identity itself. Our sense of morality is tied to who we believe we are, what values we hold, and how we navigate the social world. When that compass tilts, the ground beneath us shifts. We lose the ability to clearly distinguish our own true values from those imposed by circumstance. Instead, survival instincts hijack moral judgment. Survival becomes synonymous with devotion. Survival becomes the new god. Historically and socially, this tilt can be seen in oppressive systems, where entire groups are coerced into adopting distorted moral frameworks. Consider societies under authoritarian regimes, where obedience, conformity, and survival are worshipped above justice or individual rights. Citizens are taught to believe that questioning authority is dangerous, that bending the rules is necessary to live, and that survival itself requires a form of loyalty bordering on worship. In such contexts, the morality compass of whole communities is tilted towards submission and survival, making resistance not only dangerous but morally suspect within that skewed frame. Even on smaller scales, like cults or closed social groups, the morality tilt is a powerful tool. Members are subtly conditioned to accept the group's dictates as moral imperatives. The outside world's ethics are dismissed or demonized. The group's survival, its unity and secrecy, is elevated to a divine principle. Questioning or dissent is equated with betrayal, not just of the group, but of survival itself. This tilting of morality blurs the boundaries between right and wrong, turning loyalty into worship. Psychologically, the morality tilt exploits deep human needs, the need for safety, belonging, and meaning. When people feel threatened, their minds naturally prioritize survival. The moral frameworks they held before become secondary, flexible. This flexibility can be exploited by manipulators who present survival as a sacred goal, a form of worship that justifies otherwise unacceptable behaviors. It's a dangerous cycle, because once survival becomes worship, the individual loses the ability to critically evaluate the morality of their actions. They become trapped in a loop where survival justifies everything. The consequences are profound and often devastating. When people accept the morality tilt, they sacrifice parts of their authentic selves, their innate sense of right and wrong, for a distorted sense of safety. They become complicit in behaviors they once would have rejected. The internal conflict grows silent and festers, replaced by a numb obedience to survival's new rules. This can lead to emotional numbness, loss of autonomy, and even the internalization of oppression. Consider the example of whistleblowers in toxic environments. Initially, their moral compass is clear. They see injustice and want to act. But as the pressure mounts and the cost of resistance threatens their very livelihood and safety, the tilt begins. Survival instincts push them to silence. The line between speaking out and risking everything versus staying silent to survive becomes a battleground of morality. When survival becomes worship, the whistleblower may choose silence, sacrificing their moral truth to protect themselves. But awareness is the key to breaking this cycle. Recognizing the morality tilt is the first step toward reclaiming one's compass. It requires deep introspection and courage to see where survival instincts have been elevated above ethical judgment. It demands questioning where boundaries have shifted without conscious consent, and it requires the strength to re-anchor oneself in a personal moral framework that resists the easy pull toward distorted survival worship. This is not easy. The psychological forces behind the morality tilt are subtle and persistent. They seep into the cracks of self-esteem, identity, and social belonging. But with conscious effort, with external support, and with a commitment to inner truth, the compass can be realigned. Wrong can be reclaimed as wrong, and survival can be understood as a necessity, but not a god. In the end, the morality tilt is a story of power, the power to shape how people perceive right and wrong, to rewrite internal rules without direct confrontation. It's a story of subtle control and deep psychological manipulation, but it is also a story of resilience, of the possibility to reclaim one's moral north despite the tilt, to break free from the worship of survival, and to live authentically. We all carry a compass inside us. When that compass is tilted, life becomes a maze of confusion, fear, and compromise. But that compass can be recalibrated. It begins with awareness, it begins with courage, and it begins with the refusal to let survival alone dictate what is right and what is wrong. Because true survival is not about worshiping fear or control. True survival is about living with integrity, choosing what honors the self and the world, even when it is hard. This is the dark, quiet, and insidious power of the morality tilt, and this is why understanding it is crucial, not just to recognize manipulation in others, but to protect the integrity of our own inner compass in a world that often wants to tilt it. The memory replacement effect. They say memory is the foundation of who we are, our past stitched into the present, guiding our sense of self and shaping every decision. But what if that foundation isn't as solid as we believe? What if the memories we hold so dearly, that feel so vivid and undeniable, could be altered, replaced, or even fabricated by forces beyond our control? This is the terrifying essence of the memory replacement effect. Imagine someone telling you, with absolute confidence, about a moment from your past, an event so detailed, so specific, that you begin to question your own mind. At first, you might think, maybe I just forgot. But as they persist, their conviction acts like a seed planted in your subconscious, growing into a false recollection that feels as real as any genuine memory. Over time, the line between what truly happened and what was implanted blurs, until your mind accepts the replacement as reality. This isn't science fiction or paranoia. It's a phenomenon studied in psychology, linked to the fragile, reconstructive nature of human memory. Unlike a perfect video recording, our memories are malleable, shaped not only by what we experienced, but by how we interpret and retell those experiences. Every act of remembering is also an act of rewriting. Experiments by cognitive scientists have demonstrated how suggestive questioning or confident misinformation can rewrite memories in a person's mind. One famous study asked participants about a childhood event, like getting lost in a mall, which many didn't recall. Yet, when presented with fabricated details and encouraged to remember, a surprising number later recalled those false events vividly, complete with sensory details and emotions. These aren't lies people consciously tell themselves. They are genuine, involuntary mental constructions. The implications are chilling. If memories can be so easily replaced or fabricated, then how much of our identity, our trust in ourselves, depends on fragile threads that can be unraveled? Consider the ways this effect plays out in everyday life. In relationships, a partner might insist an argument unfolded in a way you don't remember, casting you as the villain. With repetition and emotional intensity, you might begin doubting your own recollection, second-guessing what you thought was true. In legal settings, eyewitness testimony can be corrupted by suggestive interrogation or exposure to false narratives, leading to wrongful convictions. The memory replacement effect is a key factor in these miscarriages of justice. It also plays a darker role in manipulation and abuse. Gaslighting, a tactic where someone systematically distorts reality to make you doubt yourself, relies heavily on replacing your memories with false narratives. The more they insist, the more your mind conforms, surrendering your trust in your own experiences to theirs. Beyond interpersonal dynamics, this effect touches on the philosophical question of reality itself. If what we remember can be altered, can we ever be sure of an objective past? How much of our history, personal or collective, is shaped by the stories told by those who control the narrative? On a societal level, propaganda and disinformation operate by eroding shared memories and facts, replacing them with manufactured versions that serve particular agendas. Our collective memory becomes a battlefield where truth and falsehood clash. But how does this replacement actually occur in the brain? Neuroscience shows that memory is stored in networks of neurons that fire together to reconstruct past events. Each time a memory is recalled, it becomes malleable, a process called reconsolidation, open to modification before being stored again. During this window, external information, such as suggestion or persuasion, can rewrite the memory's content. The very act of remembering thus becomes a vulnerability, exposing the past to distortion. There are real-world examples illustrating the devastating power of this effect. In cases of false memory syndrome, individuals have come to believe they experienced traumatic events, such as abuse or accidents, which never happened. These memories, often planted during suggestive therapy or intense emotional pressure, can upend lives, relationships, and mental health. The ethical challenges are profound. How can we protect the sanctity of memory when it is so susceptible? How do we defend ourselves against those who wield this power consciously to manipulate, deceive, or control? The answer lies in awareness, critical thinking, and fostering environments where questioning and verification are encouraged. Recognizing that memory is fallible is the first step toward reclaiming agency over our minds. Techniques like corroborating memories with external evidence, maintaining skepticism about overly confident narratives, and cultivating mindfulness about how our minds construct reality can build resilience. The memory replacement effect also reminds us of the profound responsibility inherent in storytelling and testimony. To narrate someone's history or recount events is to hold the power to shape their sense of self. This power must be handled with care, lest we rewrite truths into fabrications. At the deepest level, this phenomenon challenges our assumptions about identity and truth. If memories are mutable, if our past can be rewritten, then the self we believe we know is fluid, contingent, and vulnerable. Yet, within this fragility lies the paradoxical strength of human consciousness, the capacity to adapt, to grow beyond trauma, to rewrite our stories not just as victims, but as survivors and authors of new meaning. In conclusion, the memory replacement effect is not merely an academic curiosity. It is a profound psychological reality with immense implications for our understanding of truth, memory, identity, and power. By illuminating this effect, we equip ourselves to better navigate the complex interplay between reality and perception, to protect our mental sovereignty, and to honor the true stories that define us. Remember, every memory you hold is precious, but also delicate. Guard it fiercely, and question what feels too certain, for sometimes the most convincing memories are the ones never truly ours. The self-blame vortex. They don't just hurt you, they shape your mind to take the blame. It starts with a simple question, or maybe a phrase disguised as concern. What did you do to provoke it? At first, it sounds almost reasonable, like maybe if you just understood better or acted differently, this wouldn't happen. But the real weapon here isn't physical or verbal, it's psychological. It's a trap, a vortex that pulls you deeper and deeper into self-doubt, guilt, and endless self-blame. Imagine waking up every day with that question echoing in your mind, not from a voice outside, but from inside your own head. You replay interactions, searching for the right answer. Was it the way you spoke, your tone, something you didn't say? You turn your memories into evidence against yourself, as if you're the cause of the abuse, the one responsible for someone else's cruelty. This is not your fault, but the self-blame vortex convinces you otherwise. This mechanism is insidious because it preys on the most human parts of us, our desire to fix things, to maintain harmony, to be loved and accepted. When someone asks, "What did you do to provoke it?" they're planting a seed that grows into a forest of second-guessing. Every smile, every word, every silence is dissected under a harsh spotlight of self-criticism. You start to feel like you're walking on eggshells, always trying to prevent the next storm. But the storm is never truly your fault. It is a reflection of their power, their inability to take responsibility. Let me tell you a story. A woman once told me about her experience with this. After years of emotional abuse, she confessed she believed she deserved the harsh words and cold silences because she thought she must have done something wrong. Her partner never said outright that it was her fault, But by always twisting the narrative, always questioning her actions, he made her feel it was. She lived in a constant state of anxiety, trying to decode invisible rules and impossible standards, only to fail and be punished. This is the self-blame vortex at work, turning a victim into their own worst enemy. This psychological manipulation is a form of control that is difficult to break. The abuser uses your empathy, your conscience, and your natural inclination to understand others against you. They never admit fault. Instead, they shift the blame so expertly that you start to believe you are the problem. This internalized blame acts like quicksand. Every attempt to escape feels like sinking deeper. It erodes your confidence, your sense of self-worth, and your ability to trust your own perceptions. Experts in trauma psychology have observed how this self-blame vortex can distort reality. Victims begin to rewrite their memories to fit the narrative the abuser enforces. They suppress the abuse or rationalize it, telling themselves that if they had just behaved differently, things would be better. This cognitive distortion not only traps them emotionally, but often makes it harder to seek help or leave the toxic environment. Let's break down why this works so effectively. First, the question, "What did you do to provoke it?" is framed in a way that makes the victim responsible without the abuser having to say a direct accusation. It's like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit where it should. You're asked to fill the gaps with your own assumptions and fears. The mind is wired to seek answers and closure, so it naturally tries to solve this puzzle, even if the pieces don't belong. Second, the question exploits the social conditioning many of us have grown up with. We learn to take responsibility for our actions, to apologize, to adjust behavior to avoid conflict. When someone weaponizes this social norm, it becomes a psychological trap. You're taught that harmony is maintained by your efforts, so if something breaks that harmony, it must be because you failed in some way. Third, it isolates you. When you blame yourself, you hesitate to reach out for support because shame convinces you that you are at fault. This isolation is critical for the abuser's control. It cuts off your lifelines, your external reality checks, and leaves you vulnerable to deeper manipulation. There is a term in psychology called learned helplessness, where repeated exposure to uncontrollable stress causes a person to believe they cannot change their situation. The self-blame vortex feeds this helplessness by eroding your belief in your own agency. You may feel stuck, trapped in a cycle where no matter what you do, the outcome is the same, abuse followed by self-recrimination. But here's the crucial truth. You are not to blame. The abuse is not a reaction to you, but a reflection of the abuser's own unresolved pain, fear, and need for control. The self-blame vortex is a lie dressed up in concern. It's a poison disguised as a question. Understanding this is the first step towards breaking free. Healing begins when you start to challenge the narrative inside your head. When you ask yourself, is this question really fair? Is it true that I caused this harm? You begin to build a new internal dialogue that places responsibility where it belongs, with the abuser, not you. This can be a difficult process, often requiring support from trusted friends, counselors, or support groups who understand the dynamics of abuse. Recognizing the signs of the self-blame vortex also helps. When you notice your thoughts spiraling into guilt, ask yourself if you are being set up to blame yourself. Is this question being asked to uncover truth or to shift responsibility? Awareness gives you power. It helps you step outside the vortex and see the manipulation clearly. Another example comes from the realm of child abuse, where victims are often told that they somehow invited the abuse through their behavior or appearance. This tragic distortion of reality is an extension of the self-blame vortex, scaled to the most vulnerable. Children naturally seek approval and love, so when they hear blame, it damages their core sense of safety and identity. Breaking this cycle requires compassionate intervention and relentless affirmation that they are never to blame. In adult relationships, the self-blame vortex may manifest in subtler ways, through gaslighting, passive aggression, or withholding affection. The abuser never has to raise a fist or shout. The mere suggestion that you provoked the negative behavior keeps you under control. It's a psychological siege that wears you down silently. If you find yourself caught in this vortex, know that recovery is possible. It begins with self-compassion and the courage to question the lies you've been told. Journaling your experiences, seeking therapy, and connecting with survivors can illuminate the truth hidden beneath the layers of self-doubt. You are more than the blame placed upon you. Your worth is not defined by someone else's cruelty. The self-blame vortex feeds on silence and shame, but when you speak out and stand up for yourself, its power diminishes. Each step towards truth is a step towards freedom. Remember, abuse thrives in confusion. Clarity is a weapon against it. The question, "What did you do to provoke it?" is not a call to self-examination, but a call to resist internalizing blame. It is an invitation to reclaim your story, your mind, and your life. In closing, never forget, you are not the cause of someone else's abuse. The self-blame vortex is a cunning illusion designed to trap you, but it can be unmade. Your mind, your voice, and your heart hold the keys to escape. Trust in yourself. You deserve that truth. The closure deprivation loop. They never give you real endings, just slants, half answers, emotional leftovers. So, you keep returning for the resolution that never comes. This is the closure deprivation loop, a haunting cycle that traps your mind in an endless search for finality, a desperate longing for a conclusion that remains forever out of reach. It's a psychological limbo where your thoughts circle around questions with no answers. Your heart clings to what was never fully said, and your soul yearns for a peace that never arrives. Closure is fundamental to human psychology. Our brains crave completeness. When a story, a relationship, or an experience ends abruptly, without explanation or clear resolution, it leaves a gap, an unfinished chapter in the narrative of our lives. The closure deprivation loop exploits this need, turning ambiguity into an emotional trap. Imagine the pain of a conversation that ends with silence, where questions hang unanswered, where feelings are left raw and undefined. Without closure, your mind becomes a restless detective, piecing together fragments, replaying memories, seeking signs and meanings that might bring understanding. But the harder you search, the more elusive the truth becomes. This lack of resolution fuels an obsessive loop. You revisit old messages, reread conversations, analyze every detail, hoping to find a clue that will unlock the mystery. You imagine scenarios, what was unsaid, what might have been meant, why the silence. Each hypothesis breeds more questions, deeper confusion, and an intensifying ache. The closure deprivation loop is emotionally exhausting. It keeps you tethered to the past, preventing healing and moving forward. Every new day is haunted by the ghost of an unresolved ending, a liminal space where hope and despair intertwine. This limbo is not just painful, it rewires your brain to expect ambiguity, mistrust, and emotional uncertainty. In relationships, this looks like the sudden disappearance of someone without explanation, a breakup without conversation, or repeated promises that never materialize. The victim is left in a state of limbo, struggling to make sense of silence. This emotional deprivation becomes a form of control, a power play where withholding closure keeps you hooked, hopeful, and vulnerable. Workplaces and friendships can also wield this tactic. A project abandoned without feedback, a friendship that fades without explanation. Each leaves a residue of confusion and unanswered questions. The absence of closure creates a vacuum, one that your mind compulsively fills with fears, regrets, and what-ifs. Neurologically, uncertainty activates the brain's anxiety circuits. The amygdala, the fear center, lights up in response to ambiguity and unpredictability. Without closure, your nervous system remains on high alert, scanning for cues that might never come. This chronic state of uncertainty elevates stress hormones, damages emotional regulation, and impairs cognitive function. The loop traps you because the human mind is wired to seek patterns and meaning. Unfinished business triggers a survival mechanism. Your brain treats ambiguity as a threat, compelling you to find answers to restore balance. But when closure is withheld, the loop tightens, becoming a source of chronic emotional distress. Breaking free from the closure deprivation loop requires deliberate action. Recognizing the pattern is the first step. Understanding that the absence of closure is itself a form of emotional manipulation or neglect, not your failure to understand. Naming the loop disempowers its hold. Next comes acceptance. Paradoxically, accepting that you may never receive answers or endings is liberating. It means relinquishing the desperate search and embracing uncertainty. This acceptance is not resignation, but a reclaiming of your emotional autonomy. Therapeutic techniques such as mindfulness help cultivate this acceptance. By learning to sit with uncertainty without judgment, you weaken the loop's grip. Journaling, creative expression, and talking with trusted confidants provide outlets to process emotional leftovers. Setting boundaries is critical. Communicate your need for clarity where possible. If closure is denied, make peace with your own conclusions. Writing letters you never send or ritualizing endings can help symbolically close chapters in your life. Examples reveal the loop's reach. Consider someone ghosted after years of friendship, left to wonder what went wrong. The absence of closure haunts them, coloring future relationships with doubt. Or an employee abandoned mid-project with no explanation, struggling to move forward professionally. Closure deprivation is a silent thief of peace. It steals your ability to heal and to trust. Yet, understanding this loop offers hope. Knowing it is a pattern, not your fault, empowers you to reclaim your narrative. You hold the key to your own closure. It may not come from others, but you can create it. Through awareness, acceptance, and compassionate self-care, you can break the endless cycle of unanswered questions. The closure deprivation loop thrives in silence and uncertainty, but it cannot survive your clarity and courage. Step forward into the light of your own resolution and free yourself from the pull of endings that never came. The kindness collapse cycle. They're kind when you submit, cold when you resist. You begin to think kindness is something to earn, not something you deserve. This is the essence of the kindness collapse cycle, a manipulation so subtle and insidious that it erodes your sense of self-worth and rewires your expectations of human connection. At its core, this cycle weaponizes kindness itself, twisting a natural human need into a control mechanism that keeps you compliant and questioning your own value. Kindness is a fundamental human experience, a signal of safety, acceptance, and warmth. When given freely, it nurtures growth and belonging. But when kindness becomes conditional, tied to your behavior and obedience, it ceases to be a gift and turns into a tool of psychological imprisonment. The kindness collapse cycle exploits this shift, making you believe that kindness must be earned through submission rather than simply being your right as a person. Imagine the pattern. At first, kindness flows freely, drawing you in, soothing your fears, and creating an illusion of genuine care. This warmth feels like a balm to your vulnerabilities, reinforcing a bond of trust. But the moment you show resistance, doubt, or independence, that kindness withdraws, replaced by coldness, silence, or even hostility. This sudden withdrawal feels like punishment, not for your actions alone, but for your very existence as a person asserting boundaries. What happens inside your mind is a devastating rewrite of your emotional map. Your nervous system begins to link kindness not with unconditional acceptance, but with compliance. You start asking yourself, what must I do to be worthy of kindness? How much do I have to give up to keep it? The result is a painful internal negotiation, where your needs and desires shrink under the weight of conditional love. This cycle is particularly powerful because it activates the brain's reward and fear systems simultaneously. Kindness releases dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals associated with pleasure and bonding. Coldness, on the other hand, triggers stress hormones like cortisol, creating emotional pain and anxiety. Your brain learns to chase kindness as a reward and avoid resistance as a threat, shaping behavior in ways that feel automatic and irresistible. The consequences ripple far beyond the immediate relationship. Over time, the kindness collapse cycle undermines your ability to trust your own feelings and judgments. You become hypervigilant to signs of kindness or coldness, scanning every interaction for clues about when acceptance might be granted or withdrawn. This hyper-awareness drains your emotional energy and blurs the line between genuine affection and manipulation. Real-life examples of this cycle appear in toxic friendships, romantic relationships, and even workplace dynamics. A partner who showers you with warmth only when you conform, but turns icy when you assert yourself, creates a push-pull dynamic that keeps you off balance. A boss who offers praise selectively based on unquestioning obedience conditions your motivation on compliance rather than merit. These patterns are disguised as normal relational ups and downs, but they systematically erode your autonomy and sense of worth. The kindness collapse cycle is not about kindness itself, but about control masquerading as kindness. It leverages your deep human need for connection and belonging, twisting it into a means to silence dissent and enforce submission. This makes it a particularly cruel form of emotional manipulation, because it turns something sacred into a weapon against you. Escaping this cycle requires reclaiming the understanding that kindness is a right, not a reward. It means recognizing that your worth does not fluctuate based on others' approval or warmth. This is a radical shift in mindset that challenges the core conditioning imposed by the cycle. It calls for building relationships where kindness is consistent, respectful, and not contingent on your compliance. Breaking free also means developing a strong internal compass, trusting your feelings, setting boundaries, and tolerating the discomfort that may come when kindness withdraws temporarily. It requires resisting the impulse to chase approval at the cost of your well-being. Instead, you learn to seek connections where kindness flows freely and authentically, and where resistance is met not with coldness, but with respect. In a world where manipulation often wears a friendly face, the kindness collapse cycle stands as a reminder that not all kindness is genuine. It calls on you to look beneath the surface, to distinguish between warmth that nurtures and warmth that ensnares. By doing so, you reclaim the right to be kind to yourself and to demand kindness that is unconditional and true. Understanding this cycle is a step toward emotional liberation, a journey from conditioned obedience to self-respecting connection. It's about rewriting the narrative that kindness must be earned and embracing the truth that you deserve kindness simply because you are. This realization is a powerful act of reclaiming your humanity, breaking free from manipulation, and opening the door to authentic, healthy relationships. The kindness collapse cycle teaches us that the path to true connection is not paved with conditional warmth, but with genuine acceptance. It reminds us that true kindness never collapses. It endures, even in resistance, even in imperfection. And when you learn to recognize this, you step into a freedom where kindness is no longer a currency to be traded, but a birthright to be embraced. The reality shift trick. They don't just challenge your ideas, they rewrite your reality. They retell stories, correct your memories, and twist your logic so skillfully that you begin to question the very fabric of what you once believed was true. This is the reality shift trick, a manipulative process so subtle and profound, it can unravel your trust in your own mind and replace it with a version of reality crafted by someone else. Their version, strangely enough, starts to feel safer, more stable, more reliable than your own. Imagine the way memories work. Not as perfect recordings, but as malleable reconstructions. Every time you recall an event, your brain reassembles the pieces, influenced by emotions, context, and even suggestion. This fragility is a doorway for manipulation. The reality shift trick exploits this. By repeatedly telling you a story different from what you remember, they seed doubt. Did that really happen like you think? Are you sure about what you saw? Slowly, the ground beneath your memories shifts. What was once a clear, vivid experience becomes fuzzy, uncertain, disputed. The danger lies not only in the distortion of facts, but in the erosion of your confidence. When your memories become unreliable, when your logic is questioned incessantly, your mind enters a state of confusion. You start to second-guess your perceptions, your judgments, your very sanity. This is the goal: to destabilize your trust in yourself so deeply that you cling to their version of reality as a lifeline. Take, for example, a relationship where one partner constantly disputes what was said or done. You recall a conversation or an event, but they insist it happened differently. You're remembering it wrong, they say. That's not how it went. At first you argue, then you pause, then you wonder. Maybe you are wrong. Maybe your memory is faulty. Over time, these corrections pile up until you no longer trust your own mind. You defer to their narrative because it's simpler, less stressful, or because questioning it triggers conflict and fear. This technique is often a tool in emotional abuse, a form of gaslighting. But it's not limited to toxic relationships. On a societal scale, it's a powerful mechanism for control. Propaganda, misinformation, and revisionist histories are collective reality shift tricks. Authorities retell national stories, rewrite past events, and challenge dissenting accounts until the public doubts their own understanding of history. The official narrative becomes the safe one, the one that must be accepted to avoid alienation or punishment. Your personal memories, your independent analysis, are replaced by a constructed, controlled version of reality. Psychologically, this manipulation preys on the brain's need for cognitive consistency. Humans seek coherence in their understanding of the world. When faced with conflicting information, the mind struggles to reconcile differences. The reality shift trick forces that struggle repeatedly, exhausting mental resources and pushing the individual to accept the easier, imposed version of events. It is an attack on epistemic trust, the trust in our capacity to know what is true. Neurologically, this process can be devastating. The hippocampus, essential for memory formation, and the prefrontal cortex, involved in reasoning, both rely on consistent input. Persistent reality distortion can induce stress and anxiety, impairing these brain functions further and deepening the dependency on the manipulator's version. Over time, the victim's identity fragments as their personal history becomes uncertain, their sense of self destabilized. Examples abound in history where entire populations were subjected to collective reality shifts. Consider regimes that rewrite textbooks to erase inconvenient truths or distort facts to demonize enemies. Citizens grow to distrust their own memories in favor of the sanctioned story. This enforced collective confusion cements power by monopolizing the narrative and delegitimizing alternate viewpoints. On a more personal level, the reality shift trick creates an internal prison. When you cannot trust your memories, you lose a foundational anchor of self-knowledge. Who you were, what you experienced, how you understand relationships, all becomes suspect. This not only isolates you, but weakens your ability to advocate for yourself, to resist manipulation, to reclaim autonomy. To break free from this trick requires intense mental vigilance and external validation. Keeping records, writing journals, and discussing memories with trusted others can help preserve an independent account of reality. But even this is difficult when the manipulator controls your environment or social circle. The fear of disbelief, ridicule, or retaliation can silence dissenting voices within you and around you. It is important to understand that the reality shift trick is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to the power of manipulation. Anyone can fall prey when confronted with repeated distortions of truth by someone they rely on, emotionally or socially. Recognizing the pattern, the relentless questioning of your reality, the corrections of your memories, the persistent undermining of your logic, is the first step toward reclaiming your mind. Healing from this requires rebuilding trust in yourself. It means affirming your experiences, validating your perceptions, and reclaiming your story. It involves separating your truth from the imposed narrative and daring to hold on to it, despite pressure to abandon it. This process is often slow and painful, but essential for restoring autonomy and peace. Ultimately, the reality shift trick exposes a terrifying vulnerability, that reality itself can be weaponized against us. When those we trust or depend on distort our memories and challenge our logic, they destabilize the very ground on which our identity and sanity stand. But awareness is a shield. By understanding how this trick works, how memories can be manipulated and reality redefined, you gain power to resist, to anchor yourself, and to find your way back to your own truth. This manipulation is not only about control, but about survival. Ironically, the imposed version of reality often presents itself as safer, a way to avoid conflict, punishment, or abandonment. The mind, desperate for safety, may choose this shelter even if it means sacrificing clarity and truth. But safety built on falsehood is fragile. It can crumble when the imposed reality contradicts deeper intuition or external evidence. In the end, surviving the reality shift trick means reclaiming the courage to question, to doubt, and to affirm your own perceptions. It means breaking free from the imposed narrative and restoring your trust in your own mind. Because the greatest power anyone can have is the ability to say, "This is my reality, I know it, I trust it." And to live from that place, no matter how difficult the journey, is true freedom. The timed rescue reflex. They say that true rescue brings relief, a sudden lifting from pain into safety. But what if that rescue was no accident? What if the very hands that pull you from the fire are the ones who lit the flames in the first place? This is the haunting dynamic at the heart of the timed rescue reflex. It's a manipulation so subtle and profound that you don't even realize you're caught in its grip. Imagine suffering that stretches just to the brink, a precise balance of agony and endurance. Not so long that you break completely, but just long enough to feel vulnerable, desperate, craving relief. Then, at the exact moment when surrender seems inevitable, the rescuer steps in. Their timing is impeccable, their intervention framed as salvation. You feel grateful, relieved, even indebted. But beneath this apparent mercy lies a darker truth. The suffering was orchestrated, controlled, maintained by the same force that claims to save you. This is not rescue born of compassion. It is control disguised as kindness. The timed rescue reflex is a psychological mechanism often wielded unconsciously in toxic relationships, power dynamics, and manipulative systems. It's a calculated cycle of harm and help that keeps the victim tethered, dependent, and trapped. To understand this deeply, we must explore the intricate dance between pain and relief that the mind undergoes in these situations. When suffering occurs, our nervous system activates a primal alarm, the fight, flight, or freeze response. Pain floods the senses, urgency rises, and the body searches instinctively for escape. But if escape seems impossible or delayed just enough, a yearning for rescue grows with intensity. When relief finally arrives, it floods the system with dopamine and oxytocin, the brain's natural rewards for safety and connection. This biochemical rush creates a powerful association. The rescuer becomes a source of relief, a protector, even a provider of hope. But what if this relief is part of a cycle deliberately maintained? Consider examples in real life. In certain toxic relationships, an abuser might provoke distress through neglect, emotional cruelty, or withholding affection, watching the victim's pain deepen. Just as the victim approaches breaking point, the abuser offers comfort or promises change, restoring hope temporarily. This rescue is not unconditional, it's a strategic move to regain control and reinforce dependency. The victim, desperate for reprieve, clings to this hope, often overlooking the pattern of harm. The cycle repeats, each iteration reinforcing the bond through a mix of fear and gratitude. This is the essence of trauma bonding, a psychological tether that binds victim and abuser tightly through alternating pain and rescue. On a larger scale, this reflex manifests in institutional or systemic dynamics. Consider organizations or leaders who allow crises to develop or worsen, only to intervene at the last moment with solutions that enhance their authority or control. The suffering endured by those affected heightens the perceived value of the rescue, and loyalty or compliance is bought through this painful exchange. The timed nature of the rescue is critical. If relief came too early, the victim might escape or resist control. Too late, and the victim might break completely, shattering the cycle. But by calibrating suffering and rescue, the manipulator maintains a delicate balance, enough pain to create need, enough relief to inspire dependence. Neurologically, this cycle exploits the brain's reward and attachment systems. The unpredictable timing of rescue enhances its impact, creating a form of intermittent reinforcement that is known to produce strong behavioral conditioning. Like a slot machine that pays out at uncertain intervals, the victim becomes hooked, continuously seeking the next rescue, willing to endure increasing suffering to obtain it. This dynamic can distort self-perception and agency. The victim may begin to see their own suffering as necessary, even deserved, because it is the pathway to relief and connection. The rescuer's presence is idealized, their interventions magnified, while the initial harm is minimized or rationalized. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where freedom is sacrificed for the illusion of safety. The timed rescue reflex also raises profound ethical questions. When does intervention cross from genuine aid into manipulation? How do we discern rescue that empowers from rescue that controls? For those caught in these cycles, breaking free requires not only external support, but deep internal work. Recognizing the pattern, reclaiming agency, and healing from the wounds inflicted by controlled suffering. It requires confronting the paradox that relief was linked inseparably to pain, and that what felt like salvation was also captivity. In therapeutic contexts, awareness of this reflex helps survivors understand their emotional entanglement and dependence. By decoding the timing and emotional triggers of rescue, individuals can learn to identify authentic support versus manipulative cycles. This empowers them to set boundaries and seek healthier relationships where suffering is not weaponized. The timed rescue reflex teaches us about the complexity of human connection, how vulnerability can be exploited, how suffering can be commodified, and how kindness can be twisted into control. It challenges us to question the motives behind aid, to look beyond surface gratitude, and to honor true freedom over conditional salvation. Ultimately, understanding this effect is a step toward breaking chains forged in pain, toward reclaiming autonomy from those who orchestrate our suffering and relief. It invites us to redefine rescue, not as a timed reflex engineered by others, but as genuine liberation born from choice, respect, and unconditional care. Remember, true rescue does not require suffering to precede it. It does not seek to balance harm with healing. It stands apart from manipulation, offering safety without strings attached. When you feel relief, ask yourself, was the pain real or manufactured? Was the rescue truly freeing or a calculated tether? Your answer may illuminate the shadowy dance of the timed rescue reflex and guide you toward authentic freedom. The intimacy leak control. They let you in. At first, it feels like a gift, an opening, a bridge built with trust and vulnerability. They share things that cut deep, secrets not meant for many ears. It's intoxicating. You feel honored, special, like you've unlocked a hidden chamber of their soul. You listen closely as they unravel their past, their fears, their desires, their wounds. Each confession is a thread weaving you closer, binding you with invisible ties. This early oversharing feels like intimacy, like connection. But it's a trap, a carefully designed strategy called the intimacy leak control. After this flood of revelation, suddenly the tide turns. They retract, withdrawing into silence. The same walls that seem to open now close like iron gates. The vulnerability you once saw is replaced with distance, coldness, or evasiveness. They no longer reveal what's inside. Instead, they hold the power of silence, a silence that speaks louder than words. It hangs heavy in the air, leaving you exposed. You've bled out information about yourself, your feelings, your fears, but they remain a locked vault. This imbalance shifts the power entirely into their hands. Imagine being in a conversation where you've just shared your deepest thoughts, and the other person simply nods but says nothing more about themselves. You reach out emotionally, but the response is a wall. This dynamic is exhausting and confusing. It creates a vacuum where you feel raw and vulnerable, while they seem guarded and in control. The intimacy you thought was mutual becomes a one-sided exchange, a deliberate leak of personal data with no reciprocity. This strategy is not accidental. It is a form of psychological control and manipulation. By oversharing first, they disarm your defenses. You lower your guard because you believe you are entering a safe space. But once you have given parts of yourself, they pull back. Using the silence as a tool, you're left craving the connection they withhold, desperate to close the gap, to coax them to open up again. This craving makes you more likely to share even more, hoping to restore the balance. But the balance never comes. The intimacy leak, control thrives on this uneven exchange. It's a silent dance where one leads and the other follows blindly, wanting more but receiving less. It creates dependency, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. You start questioning yourself. Why won't they open up? Is there something wrong with me? Did I say too much? This self-doubt is exactly what the manipulation intends. To understand this better, consider the psychology behind it. Humans are wired to seek connection, to share and be shared with. When someone gives us a glimpse into their inner world, our brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This chemical floods us with feelings of closeness and trust. It's nature's way of creating social bonds. But if this response is triggered only on one side, the imbalance becomes dangerous. You feel connected, but it's a mirage, because the other person controls the flow of information, using it as a weapon. There are real-world examples of this dynamic in toxic relationships. A partner may confess deep fears or past traumas early on, making you feel chosen and trusted. But as time passes, they shut down emotionally, refusing to share new feelings or thoughts. They expect you to remain open and vulnerable while they build walls. This keeps you chasing after their approval and connection, never fully attaining it. Another example is in manipulative friendships or work relationships. Someone may reveal sensitive information to gain your sympathy or loyalty, then disappear or become emotionally unavailable. Because you hold knowledge of their vulnerabilities, you feel tethered to them, reluctant to pull away or confront the imbalance. This silence becomes a form of power, a way to keep you entangled. This control through intimacy and silence is also connected to gaslighting. The silence after oversharing leaves you uncertain. You question what you heard, how you interpreted it, and if you should have expected more openness. The manipulation lies in creating a narrative where your need for connection becomes your weakness, and their withholding is a form of punishment or dominance. Breaking free from the intimacy. Leak control requires awareness. The first step is recognizing the pattern, the flood of oversharing followed by a dam of silence. It's crucial to see this not as genuine intimacy, but as a calculated imbalance. Genuine relationships involve mutual vulnerability and reciprocity, not one-sided exposure. Next, reclaim your boundaries. When you notice yourself sharing more and more, but receiving less, pause and ask, is this exchange healthy? Am I being heard and valued? It's okay to withhold some parts of yourself until trust and reciprocity are proven. Vulnerability is precious. It should not be spent on those who wield it as leverage. Seeking outside perspectives helps too. Trusted friends, therapists, or support groups can reflect back the reality of your situation. They can help you see if you're caught in a manipulative cycle or if your feelings are being respected. Validation from others is a shield against the isolation that intimacy leak control tries to create. Consider the emotional toll of this manipulation. Constantly sharing without receiving leaves you drained, anxious, and hollow. You may develop anxiety around communication, fearing the silence or the withdrawal. Over time, this can damage your self-esteem and your ability to trust others. Healing means rediscovering balance, giving and receiving in healthy measure. One way to restore balance is through honest communication. If you feel comfortable, express your feelings about the silence and the imbalance. Sometimes people don't realize the impact of their withdrawal, but if the pattern continues, it's a clear sign of manipulation, and stepping back may be necessary for your well-being. In some cases, this manipulation is subtle and insidious, especially in early relationships where the initial rush of vulnerability feels intoxicating. The intimacy leak control capitalizes on that rush, making you invest emotionally before you have a clear view of the other person's true character. It's a form of emotional entrapment, binding you with threads of confessions while holding back the same from themselves. Understanding this control dynamic can empower you to protect yourself. Vulnerability is strength, but it must be shared with those who respect and reciprocate it. You deserve relationships where intimacy flows both ways, where silence is a space of comfort, not a weapon. Remember, the power of silence is only effective when it leaves you uncertain and exposed. When you recognize it, you take back control. Silence can then become your ally, a moment to reflect, to heal, to reclaim your story. The intimacy leak, control loses its grip when you refuse to be the only one bleeding information. In closing, know that real intimacy is mutual. It builds slowly, with trust earned and given in equal measure. It does not demand that one person spill their soul while the other retreats. The intimacy leak, control, is a false intimacy, a strategy of power and control disguised as closeness. Seeing through it is the first step toward freedom, healing, and genuine connection. You have the right to protect your inner world. You have the right to expect reciprocity and respect. You have the right to step away from relationships that use your vulnerability as a weapon. Your heart is valuable. Guard it wisely and surround yourself with those who honor the sacred dance of shared intimacy. The Luck Redistribution Lie. They make your success feel like their gift. Your wins weren't luck or effort, they were allowed. Now you owe them for what was always yours. This is the essence of the Luck Redistribution Lie, a subtle but devastating form of control that steals your achievements and reshapes your identity. It's a narrative crafted not to celebrate your hard work, but to tether your victories to someone else's approval, turning triumph into indebtedness. Imagine dedicating yourself to a goal with relentless focus, pouring hours, sweat, and passion into your craft. You achieve something remarkable, but instead of recognition for your skill and persistence, you're told, implicitly or explicitly, that your success happened because they permitted it. Your triumph becomes a loan, a favor, something granted, not earned. This lie rewires your sense of agency and self-worth. Why does this deception hold such power? Because it undermines the core human need for autonomy and validation. When someone convinces you that your success is contingent upon their goodwill, they become the gatekeeper of your achievements. You shift from creator to dependent, from winner to beneficiary. This shift breeds guilt, obligation, and a quiet desperation to maintain their favor. The Luck Redistribution Lie often masquerades as generosity or mentorship, a patron who gave you a chance, a boss who opened doors, a partner who supported you. While support can be genuine, the lie twists it into currency, a debt you must repay endlessly. Your achievements are reframed as incomplete without their sanction. This manipulation seeps into relationships, workplaces, and social structures. It perpetuates cycles of power imbalance. The one who claims to allow success wields invisible chains, making you question your worth and diminishing your confidence. You become trapped in a paradox, grateful for opportunities, yet shackled by the unspoken price of loyalty. Consider the psychological impact. Your brain's reward centers, the nucleus accumbens and prefrontal cortex, light up when you succeed, reinforcing motivation and self-efficacy. But the luck redistribution lie floods this system with conflicting signals. Instead of pure joy, your reward is tainted with doubt and obligation. The dopamine surge is shadowed by cortisol, the stress hormone linked to social threat and anxiety. This internal conflict fractures your identity. You may excel, but feel unworthy. You may celebrate milestones, but secretly fear losing approval. This duality erodes mental health, contributing to anxiety, depression, and burnout. Your potential is stifled by a false narrative that you are only as valuable as the favors you receive. Breaking free from this lie begins with reclaiming your agency. Acknowledge that your effort, skill, and perseverance are the true sources of your success. External support can be real, but it does not negate your contribution or diminish your achievements. Your victories are yours. Reframing your story is powerful. Practice affirmations that emphasize your role as the creator of your path. Surround yourself with people who celebrate your accomplishments without strings or silent debts. Seek environments that value autonomy and genuine collaboration. Examples illuminate this cycle. An employee told their promotion was, thanks to the company's grace, feels indebted and fearful of asserting themselves. A student reminded constantly that their scholarship was a gift, struggles to internalize their intelligence and work ethic. A creative professional whose opportunities are framed as favors battles imposter syndrome, doubting their talents. Understanding the luck redistribution lie also reveals societal patterns. Systems that privilege gatekeepers, whether in business, art, or social status, perpetuate this false narrative. Recognizing this allows collective resistance and the building of more equitable structures where success is acknowledged as earned. Therapeutic approaches support dismantling this lie. Cognitive behavioral therapy challenges distorted beliefs about self-worth and dependence. Narrative therapy helps rewrite personal stories, centering autonomy and resilience. Mindfulness practices cultivate awareness of internalized guilt and foster self-compassion. Your success is not alone. It is not a gift that must be repaid. It is the fruit of your labor, passion, and resilience. No one can allow what you create. The power you hold is inherent, unstoppable, and belongs solely to you. The luck redistribution lie is a shadow cast over your achievements, but you have the light to dispel it. Step into your power, claim your victories, and refuse the false debts imposed by others. Your journey, your wins, your success, they are yours. Own them fiercely. Celebrate without apology. Thrive without permission. The Soulmate weaponization technique. They convince you you're soul-tied, that leaving them means betraying destiny. But it's not fate. It's psychological superglue disguised as romance. The Soulmate weaponization technique is a devastating manipulation, crafted to trap your heart and mind in an illusion so powerful it feels unbreakable. It masquerades as the deepest, most spiritual connection imaginable, but beneath the surface lies a calculated snare designed to bind you emotionally and control your decisions. From the very beginning, they weave the narrative of destiny. Two souls meant to be intertwined across lifetimes, bound by an unspoken cosmic agreement. This story isn't just romantic fantasy, it's a psychological trap that exploits your yearning for meaning, belonging, and unconditional love. When you believe that someone is your one true soulmate, every action, every feeling becomes charged with significance beyond the ordinary. Doubt becomes guilt. Distance becomes betrayal. Resistance becomes a threat to your very soul. This technique plays on the powerful human desire to be seen, understood, and eternally connected. It blurs boundaries, merging identities so completely that you start to lose sight of where you end and they begin. Your autonomy dissolves into the idea that your life path is shared. your choice is predetermined by forces beyond human control. This illusion of destiny acts like psychological superglue, sticky, invisible, and nearly impossible to peel away. But unlike genuine love, which thrives on mutual respect, freedom, and growth, the soulmate weaponization technique uses the language of love to trap you. It isolates you from external perspectives, convincing you that no one else could possibly understand or complete you as this soulmate does. It dismisses concerns as jealousy, misunderstanding, or a failure to grasp the cosmic bond. In doing so, it erodes your support system and deepens your reliance on the manipulator. The emotional gravity this technique exerts rewires your brain's reward system. Moments of connection release oxytocin and dopamine, reinforcing attachment. When distance or conflict arises, fear and anxiety flood your system, triggering desperate efforts to repair the bond. This push-pull dynamic keeps you tethered, exhausting your emotional reserves and impairing your judgment. Real-world examples abound. In toxic relationships, partners may claim they are destined for each other, urging you to stay despite pain, abuse, or neglect. They frame departure not as self-care, but as cosmic betrayal. You feel trapped, not just by circumstance, but by an invisible contract written in the language of fate. This weaponized soulmate narrative makes leaving feel like breaking a sacred vow, a rupture not just in relationship, but in the fabric of your very existence. Escaping this manipulation requires dismantling the illusion piece by piece. It means reclaiming your narrative, understanding that no external force predetermines your worth or your choices. True connection doesn't imprison, it liberates. It doesn't demand sacrifice of self, but honors individuality within togetherness. Recognizing the difference between genuine love and psychological superglue is the first step toward freedom. It also demands cultivating external perspectives and support, voices that remind you of your autonomy and strength beyond the destined bond. It requires patience with the emotional turmoil that arises when breaking the spell of soulmate weaponization. The pain of loss is real, but it is not a reflection of betrayal. It is the ache of reclaiming yourself. Ultimately, the soulmate weaponization technique reveals how powerful the stories we tell ourselves can be. It exposes the danger when love becomes a tool for control rather than a source of growth. But it also illuminates the path forward, to rewrite those stories with truth, self-respect, and freedom at their core. You deserve connections that uplift without binding, love that empowers without trapping. By seeing through the veil of soulmate weaponization, you step into a space where love is choice, not fate, and where your soul remains yours, free to grow, evolve, and choose again. The erasure by praise. They complement you. At first, it feels like warmth, a ray of light piercing through the shadows of doubt. Those words, the praise, fall gently on your skin, filling the cracks left by past rejection or loneliness. But there is a catch. They only complement you when you reflect them, when you echo their desires, their opinions, their expectations, when you become a mirror held up to their face. The praise is not for you, but for the version of you they want to see. This is the beginning of a subtle but devastating manipulation, the erasure by praise. Imagine a garden where the flowers only bloom if they take the shape the gardener demands. If a rose insists on being wild and free, it withers. But if it molds itself into the gardener's ideal, perfect, trimmed, colorless, it is watered, praised, and nurtured. The same happens within us. We begin to prune parts of ourselves, our quirks, our dreams, our emotions, so that we fit into the frame they've carved out. At first, it feels like love, like acceptance. The compliment is the reward for compliance. But what is erased is more than just quirks. It's the essence of who we are. Identity is not a static thing. It's a living, breathing mosaic of experiences, beliefs, fears, and hopes. The erasure by praise chips away at that mosaic, piece by piece. Each compliment for conformity is a tiny scissor snip, cutting away a shard of the authentic self. Consider the story of someone raised by a parent who only praised academic success, never creativity or emotional openness. The child learns early on that to receive approval, to hear those warm words, they must silence their artistic voice and hide their feelings. Over time, the child's identity shifts, their creative impulses fade, their emotions become locked away. They delete parts of themselves, not out of choice, but necessity. The praise acts like a drug, reinforcing the behavior that pleases, punishing the behavior that does not. In adult relationships, this dynamic can become even more insidious. A partner may lavish praise on the parts of you that mirror their values and desires, your style, your opinions, your behaviors, but withhold it when you express individuality that challenges or diverges from their vision. This conditional praise teaches you that the cost of approval is self-censorship. Slowly, without dramatic confrontation or overt coercion, you begin to delete your true feelings and thoughts. Identity dies smiling because the loss is disguised as love, the erasure masked as acceptance. This manipulation exploits deep human needs, the need to belong, to be valued, to be seen. When praise is used as a tool rather than a gift, it becomes a currency for control. The more you conform, the more you are rewarded. The more you are rewarded, the more you conform. It is a vicious cycle where your selfhood is the price paid for fleeting warmth and approval. Psychologically, the erasure by praise creates confusion and internal conflict. On one hand, you crave the praise. It feels good. It's intoxicating. On the other hand, a quiet voice within whispers of loss, of compromise, of betrayal to the self. Over time, this dissonance can manifest as anxiety, depression, or a pervasive emptiness. You become a ghost in your own life, smiling on the outside, hollow on the inside. Socially, this dynamic is reinforced by cultural pressures to conform. Media, peer groups, workplaces, all reward certain versions of identity and punish deviations. When praise is meted out only for reflecting socially accepted norms, the erasure by praise spreads like a contagion, eroding individuality on a broad scale. People become interchangeable parts in a system that values uniformity over authenticity. Breaking free from this requires tremendous courage and self-awareness. It begins with noticing when praise is conditional, when it demands sacrifice. It means recognizing the parts of yourself you have deleted and giving them space to breathe again. Healing comes from reclaiming your right to be seen fully, not just the reflected image others want to admire, but the complex, messy, authentic you. Rebuilding identity after such erasure is not a gentle process. It can be painful, disorienting, and lonely. You may face rejection or misunderstanding when you stop conforming for approval, but it is necessary. Because true acceptance, from others and from yourself, cannot be bought with parts of your soul. It must be unconditional. In the final analysis, the erasure by praise reveals a tragic irony. What appears as love and approval can be the very force that kills identity. The smiles, the compliments, the warmth, they become a velvet noose, tightening invisibly around the self. Yet, the self can survive. The self can resist. The self can reclaim its rightful place, vibrant and whole. Remember, your worth is not measured by how well you reflect someone else's image. Your worth is inherent, rooted in the fullness of your being. When you honor all parts of yourself, the light and the shadows, the wild and the calm, you step into true freedom. Identity lives, breathes, and thrives, not by dying smiling for another's praise, but by standing fierce in its own truth. This is the story of the erasure by praise, a cautionary tale of how conditional love can erode the very core of who we are, but also a story of resilience, of reclaiming voice, vision, and vitality, of choosing authenticity over approval, of living, finally, unedited. The progress sabotage spiral. They cheer you on, their voice is loud and warm, fueling your hopes and ambitions. You feel seen, encouraged, and ready to conquer the world. Yet, beneath this apparent support lies a hidden trap, a cycle so insidious that your progress becomes entwined with their subtle acts of sabotage. This is the progress sabotage spiral, a psychological dynamic where those around you appear to champion your growth, only to undermine it just enough to keep you dependent on their presence and approval. At first, their encouragement feels genuine. They celebrate your small wins, applaud your efforts, and stand by as you take steps forward. But soon, just as momentum builds, obstacles arise, disguised as advice, accidental oversights, or gentle criticisms. Perhaps it's a missed opportunity they conveniently forget to mention, a hidden flaw they point out after you've invested effort, or a subtle withdrawal of support when you need it most. These disruptions aren't overt attacks. They are finely tuned maneuvers that cause setbacks without revealing malicious intent. As setbacks accumulate, doubt creeps in. You question your abilities, your direction, your worth. In response, those who first cheered you now become your comfort, your anchor in a storm they helped to create. Their soothing words and gestures offer relief from the frustration of failure, reinforcing a dependence on their presence for emotional security. This creates a vicious spiral. Your growth depends on their subtle destruction, and their destruction ensures your continued need for their comfort. Psychologically, this spiral exploits deep human needs for belonging, approval, and safety. The manipulator becomes both the cheerleader and the saboteur, weaving a complex bond that blurs the lines between support and control. The intermittent pattern of encouragement, followed by disruption, acts as intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful behavioral conditioning tools. Like a gambler chasing wins between losses, you find yourself compelled to keep trying, hoping the next step will break the cycle. Real-world examples abound. In toxic friendships or romantic relationships, a partner might praise your dreams, but then belittle your efforts behind your back, or subtly steer you away from opportunities. In workplaces, supervisors may publicly praise employees but withhold key resources or information, ensuring progress falters. This maintains a power imbalance masked by apparent support. The emotional toll is immense. You may feel trapped in a loop of trying and failing, comforted only by the very person whose actions make success elusive. Your self-confidence erodes as you internalize the failures while your dependence on their approval grows. Over time, your identity and growth become entwined with their manipulative cycle. Breaking free requires awareness and courage. Recognizing the pattern, the subtle timing of praise and disruption, is the first step. Setting boundaries and seeking genuine, consistent support outside the manipulative relationship are vital. Empowerment comes from reclaiming your autonomy, trusting your judgment, and valuing progress that isn't contingent on others' interference. The progress sabotage spiral exposes how growth can be weaponized, how encouragement can be a facade for control, and how love or friendship can mask manipulation. Understanding this dynamic helps protect your journey toward authentic success and self-realization. True progress is nurtured, not sabotaged. It thrives in spaces where support is steady, honest, and free of hidden agendas. When you find such spaces, your growth will no longer depend on destruction, but on genuine care and freedom. The signal override trick. They begin softly, almost imperceptibly, teaching you to doubt the voice inside, the one that senses danger before words are spoken, the instinct that warns you something isn't right. It starts with subtle phrases. Don't be dramatic, they say, when you express concern or discomfort. You're overthinking, they whisper, dismissing your feelings as exaggerations. These words are like gentle taps, eroding the foundation of your trust in yourself, chipping away at your intuition until it grows faint, then silent. Your gut feeling is your most primal compass. It's the part of you that processes cues beyond conscious awareness. Micro-expressions, tones, subtle shifts in energy. It's your internal alarm system, honed by evolution to protect you from harm. But when someone deliberately trains you to ignore this signal, they hijack your internal guidance. They replace your authentic perception with their narrative, teaching you to silence the voice that warns you, and instead, listen to them. At first, you resist. That nagging unease refuses to go away. But with repeated dismissal, you start questioning yourself. Was I really overreacting? Am I too sensitive? You walk on a tightrope between trusting your feelings and accepting their version of reality. The more you're told your feelings are wrong, the more your nervous system adapts, learning to quiet the alarm to avoid conflict or punishment. This is the signal override trick, a covert form of psychological control that disables your self-trust. It trains your brain to filter out its own warnings and prioritize external voices. The consequences are profound. Without your gut speaking up, you become vulnerable to manipulation, deception, and abuse. Your internal compass, the safeguard that could steer you away from harm, is muted, leaving a void that the abuser fills with their own directives and explanations. Imagine a woman in an abusive relationship. She feels tension rising, senses the shift before words are exchanged, but each time she voices concern, she is told she is imagining things. You're too sensitive, her partner says. Over time, her anxiety quiets, replaced by confusion and self-doubt. She stops trusting her instincts, even when danger looms. This learned silence of intuition is the heart of the signal override trick. Psychologists describe this as a form of gaslighting, but with a specific focus: the erasure of intuitive knowledge. Gaslighting makes you doubt your memory and perception. Signal override makes you doubt your innate emotional and bodily responses. It's a double-layered manipulation that attacks both mind and body. Why does this happen? Because control thrives where uncertainty and dependency grow. When your gut is silenced, you lose a key resource for self-protection. You become more reliant on the abuser's version of reality, more compliant with their wishes, and less likely to resist or escape. This undermines your autonomy and deepens the power imbalance. Breaking free from the signal override trick requires relearning to listen, to trust the subtle signals your body and mind send you. It means honoring your feelings, no matter how inconvenient or dismissed they have been. This process can be difficult, especially when years of conditioning have taught you otherwise. Therapeutic approaches often focus on reconnecting individuals with their bodily sensations and emotional cues. Mindfulness practices, somatic therapies, and grounding techniques help restore the connection between intuition and conscious awareness. Slowly, the muted voice begins to rise again, reclaiming its rightful place as your guide. You might notice small shifts: an uneasy feeling in your stomach before a phone call, a tightening in your chest when a conversation turns uncomfortable. These signals are your intuition speaking. Acknowledge them without judgment. Give them space. Trust that they are there to protect you. This awareness can be life-changing. It empowers you to recognize manipulation and reclaim your boundaries. When your intuition speaks, you listen. When it warns, you act. You stop waiting for permission to trust yourself because your gut is your own. In relationships, this means challenging dismissive phrases. When someone tells you you're overthinking or don't be dramatic, you can name it for what it is: an attempt to silence your truth. You can respond by affirming your experience and asserting your right to feel. The journey back to trusting your intuition is also a journey back to yourself. It's a reclaiming of your internal authority that no one can take away. The signal override trick is powerful, but it is not invincible. Your gut remembers. Even if silenced, it waits patiently to be heard again. So listen closely. Trust those whispers beneath the noise. They are your deepest wisdom, trying to break free from control. When you learn to hear and honor your intuition once more, you step into your power. You become the speaker for your own truth, the one who overrides the override. The Purpose Piggyback. They join your mission, support your dream, then become it, until your goal isn't yours anymore, but theirs, with your name still on the file. This is the Purpose Piggyback, a subtle, insidious takeover where someone embeds themselves within your vision, not to help you soar, but to hijack your purpose and steer it away from you. It's a quiet theft, a slow erasure of your ownership masked by the illusion of support. Imagine pouring your heart into a dream, a mission that fuels your soul. Someone enters your world offering encouragement, validation, partnership. At first, it feels like a blessing, a shared journey towards something meaningful. But gradually, the lines blur. Their voice grows louder, their vision colors the path. Your mission, once clear and personal, begins to bend under their influence. The purpose. Piggyback thrives on emotional closeness and trust. The piggybacker does not challenge your goal outright. Instead, they mirror your language, echo your ideals, and slowly shift the narrative. They position themselves as indispensable, the essential force without whom your dream cannot move forward. This dependency is their leverage. Why is this so damaging? Because it erodes your agency without immediate awareness. You might believe you're still steering the ship, but in truth, the course is dictated by another. The piggybacker wears your mission like a costume, presenting it as their own accomplishment, while your role diminishes to that of a figurehead. This takeover breeds frustration, confusion, and self-doubt. Your passion is overshadowed by the growing dissonance between your vision and its execution. You question your relevance, your control, your purpose. The piggybacker's influence extends beyond the project into your identity, making you doubt your ability to lead or innovate. In workplaces, this often looks like a colleague who aligns with your project, then gradually takes credit, directs decisions, and sidelines your input. In creative endeavors, it's a partner who adopts your style, your ideas, and claims them as their own. Even in personal growth, a mentor or friend might subtly reshape your goals to fit their agenda. Neurologically, this dynamic activates stress responses linked to loss of control. The amygdala signals threat, while prefrontal areas struggle to assert autonomy. The resulting tension causes emotional fatigue, diminished motivation, and a fragmented sense of self. Breaking free from the purpose. Piggyback requires reclaiming your narrative. Recognize when your mission is being co-opted under the guise of support. Set firm boundaries around your vision and decision-making. Reaffirm your authority as the creator and steward of your goals. Communication is key. Express your needs clearly and assertively. Surround yourself with allies who honor your leadership rather than overshadow it. Reflect regularly on your purpose to maintain clarity amidst external influences. Consider examples. An entrepreneur whose business partner gradually redirects the company's values and strategies without consultation. An artist whose collaborator dominates creative choices. A social activist whose cause is repackaged by others for their gain. Understanding the purpose piggyback also invites scrutiny of systemic patterns where voices are marginalized or erased, masked by superficial inclusion. Awareness fosters resistance and cultivates environments where true collaboration respects individual ownership. Therapeutic and coaching practices help restore agency and self-trust. Techniques focusing on boundary setting, identity affirmation, and empowerment support disentangling from piggybackers and reaffirming personal purpose. Your mission is sacred. It deserves your full ownership, your voice, your vision. Let no one ride your purpose to their own destination while you are left adrift. The purpose. Piggyback is a silent erosion of your dreams, but you hold the power to reclaim what is rightfully yours. Stand firm, lead boldly, and let your purpose shine undiluted. Your dream belongs to you alone. Carry it forward with unwavering resolve. The explosive calm method. They stay calm while you spiral. They make your reaction the problem. You end up apologizing for feeling anything at all. This is the heart of the explosive calm method. A manipulative dynamic so disorienting it rewires your emotional responses and silences your pain. It is a psychological tactic that uses calmness as a weapon, a mask hiding aggression and control beneath an unshakable exterior. At first glance, their calm demeanor appears soothing, rational, even comforting. While your emotions surge, anger, fear, sadness, they remain an unflappable island of composure. But this calm is not neutrality. It's a carefully constructed battlefield where your feelings are invalidated and minimized. As you struggle to process your emotional storm, they hold steady, making it clear without words that your reaction is the problem, not the situation that triggered it. This method plays on your natural impulse to seek harmony and avoid conflict. When faced with their steady calmness, your own emotional upheaval starts to feel like a disruption. Irrational, excessive, unjustified. They don't need to raise their voice or accuse directly. Their silence and poise do the work, turning the spotlight on you and away from their behavior. Slowly, you learn to question your own experience, doubting the validity of your feelings and fears. The explosive calm method also leverages what psychologists call gaslighting. By consistently framing your emotional responses as problematic, they erode your confidence in your perceptions. You begin to apologize for expressing hurt, frustration, or disappointment, because every time you do, it's met with cool detachment that feels like silent judgment. You internalize the message that feeling is a weakness, something to be controlled or hidden. In relationships, this dynamic creates a toxic loop. You suppress your feelings to avoid triggering their cold calm, but the emotional pressure builds inside, unaddressed and festering. Meanwhile, their unruffled demeanor becomes a form of passive aggression, a quiet storm that controls without chaos. It's explosive because the calmness conceals a storm of manipulation and power, and the victim is left spiraling alone in their emotional turmoil. Examples are common in emotionally abusive relationships. A partner who remains serene when you cry or shout, making you feel like you are overreacting. A boss who never raises their voice but uses silence and composed expressions to undermine your confidence. A family member who dismisses your pain by calmly stating, "You're too sensitive," turning your legitimate feelings into personal failings. Escaping the explosive calm method requires reclaiming your right to feel authentically and fully. It demands recognizing that calmness is not inherently truth or justice. Sometimes, it's a mask for control. You must validate your own emotions independently of their reactions and seek environments where your feelings are met with empathy rather than judgment. This journey can be painful as you unlearn the habit of apologizing for your feelings. It may provoke resistance or confusion in the manipulator, but your emotional health depends on honoring your inner experience. True calm in others does not negate your pain. It coexists with respect and understanding. Understanding the explosive calm method is a powerful step toward emotional liberation. It shines a light on how silence and composure can be twisted into tools of dominance, and how reclaiming your voice breaks the cycle. Your feelings are real, important, and deserving of acknowledgement, not problems to apologize for. When you embrace this truth, you step out of the spiral and into your own power. The Symptom Amplification Hack. They observe you closely, searching for the subtle cracks in your armor, the vulnerabilities you try to hide, the insecurities you guard like secrets. This is the first step in the Symptom Amplification Hack. They don't attack outright. They don't announce their intent. Instead, they push gently, precisely, targeting those weaknesses with a careful hand, just enough to make you falter, but never enough for you to break completely. Their goal is not destruction, but manipulation. As they apply this pressure, your vulnerabilities grow louder, more prominent. The insecurities that once whispered at the edges of your mind become roaring accusations. The emotions you sought to keep private bubble to the surface and spill out in ways you never intended. You start to see yourself as unstable, as difficult, as the problem itself. This is the cruel twist. They make you the villain in your own story. The very weaknesses they magnify become evidence against you, proof that you are flawed or broken. You begin to internalize the narrative they have crafted, believing that your struggles are your fault and that you are the source of the chaos. In the confusion and pain, you find yourself begging for help. But the only help offered comes from the one who caused the pain in the first place. They position themselves as the savior, the only person capable of soothing the very wounds they inflicted. It's a trap disguised as care. Consider the dynamics in relationships where emotional abuse is present. A partner might quietly poke at insecurities, your fears of abandonment, your self-doubt, until those insecurities consume you. Then, when you reach out in desperation, they offer consolation, reinforcing your dependence on them. The cycle repeats, trapping you in a web where your amplified symptoms justify their control. On a larger scale, this manipulation can appear in institutions or systems that highlight individuals' problems to justify intervention or control. By amplifying a weakness or symptom, they create a problem that only they can solve, binding you to their authority. Psychologically, the Symptom Amplification Hack erodes self-trust and autonomy. It twists your perception so that you question your reality and believe you need rescuing from the very source of harm. This manipulation feeds on compassion and vulnerability, turning your strengths into weaknesses and your needs into shackles. Breaking free requires recognizing the cycle. It means understanding that the intensification of your struggles is not accidental but orchestrated. Healing begins when you reclaim your narrative, seek support beyond the source of harm, and rebuild your sense of self independent of their influence. This hack is a dark mirror reflecting how power can be wielded with subtlety and cruelty. It teaches us to guard not just our boundaries, but also our perceptions, to question narratives that cast us as villains in our own lives, and to find strength beyond those who seek to amplify our pain for their gain. The Empathy Drain Protocol. They draw you in with stories of pain, loss, and hardship over and over again. Their sadness becomes the air you breathe, thick and heavy, pressing on your chest, weighing down your spirit. This is the core of the Empathy Drain Protocol, a relentless emotional siphoning that slowly erodes your own capacity for joy and peace. It begins subtly. At first, you offer a shoulder, a listening ear, genuine compassion. But as their sadness becomes constant, an unspoken rule emerges. Your happiness feels like a betrayal of their suffering. Your light is dimmed by the shadow of their pain. In this draining dynamic, empathy turns from a gift into a burden. You find yourself policing your feelings, censoring moments of laughter or relief, because they provoke guilt or resentment. The natural ebb and flow of emotional energy is hijacked, replaced by a one-sided regulation, where your emotions serve as a thermostat to their ever-fluctuating distress. Your needs become secondary, your boundaries blurred. You are no longer allowed to prioritize your well-being because doing so disrupts their emotional equilibrium. This protocol thrives on an unbalanced exchange. The constant sharing of sorrow is less about seeking help and more about demanding emotional labor from you. The sadness is a tool, consciously or unconsciously wielded, to maintain control and deepen dependence. Your role shifts from equal partner or friend to caretaker of their feelings, a role that drains your vitality and blurs your identity. Psychologically, the empathy drain protocol taps into deep human instincts. Our brains are wired for empathy. We mirror others' emotions, feel their pain, and seek to soothe it. But empathy has limits. When overloaded, it becomes compassion fatigue, a state of emotional exhaustion that leaves you depleted and disconnected from your own feelings. Yet, in this protocol, stepping back is often met with guilt, accusations of coldness or withdrawal, trapping you in an endless cycle of giving without replenishment. Consider relationships where this dynamic is evident. A friend or partner may recount their troubles daily, leaving little room for reciprocal sharing. Attempts to express your own emotions are minimized or redirected back to their sadness. Celebrations and successes are overshadowed by reminders of their pain, making your joy feel wrong. Over time, you might feel isolated, as if your true self must be hidden to preserve the fragile emotional balance. Breaking free requires recognizing the signs, the chronic guilt, the emotional exhaustion, the loss of self amid another's sorrow. Setting firm boundaries is essential, allowing yourself space to experience joy without guilt, prioritizing your emotional health, and seeking relationships where empathy is mutual. Therapy and self-care practices can help restore your emotional reserves and rebuild a sense of identity separate from others' pain. The empathy drain protocol reveals a dark side of connection, the way compassion can be manipulated into a leash that binds and diminishes. But it also reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit. By reclaiming your emotional autonomy, you honor both yourself and the true meaning of empathy, a balanced exchange that uplifts rather than drains. Remember, your joy is not betrayal. It is a vital, healing force. Guard it fiercely, nurture it wisely, and never let the sorrow of another extinguish the light within you. The control by failure loop. They set the stage carefully, crafting a scenario where your efforts are destined to falter. It starts innocently enough. They encourage you to try, to take a chance, to prove yourself. But behind this encouragement lies a hidden design. They have anticipated the outcome, failure. Not because you lack ability, but because the conditions are stacked against you. The task might be impossible, the instructions unclear, or the resources withheld. They watch as you stumble, falter, and ultimately fall short. This is the control by failure loop. Each failure chips away at your confidence, eroding your belief in your own competence. You begin to question your judgment, your skills, your worth. Why can't you get it right? What is wrong with you? These thoughts spiral, tightening the grip they have on your self-trust. And just when your doubt peaks, they step in with help. It's offered as kindness, as guidance, but in truth, it's a calculated move to seize control. Their help comes wrapped in authority and benevolence. Let me do it for you, they say. You don't have to struggle anymore. What started as your opportunity to grow becomes their domain. You relinquish control, not out of choice, but because your inner voice of confidence has been silenced by repeated failure. The control by failure loop transforms autonomy into dependence. This pattern is a subtle form of manipulation and psychological bondage. It's a slow erosion of your self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence outcomes through your own actions. Each failure convinces you that you cannot succeed without their intervention. And as your reliance grows, so does their power. Consider a workplace scenario. A manager assigns a complex project without sufficient support. When the project falters, they step in to save it, positioning themselves as indispensable. The employee internalizes the failure, believing they are incapable, while the manager solidifies control. This dynamic creates a cycle where growth is stunted and dependency reinforced. In personal relationships, this loop can manifest as a partner who undermines your attempts to solve problems or make decisions. They may give you tasks designed to be too difficult or vague, knowing you will stumble. Then, they offer to take over, presenting themselves as the only reliable source of stability. Over time, this dynamic isolates you emotionally and practically. Psychologists recognize this as learned helplessness, where repeated exposure to unsolvable challenges conditions a person to give up trying. The control by failure loop is a mechanism that accelerates this process by interspersing failure with controlled rescue, keeping you trapped in a cycle of doubt and dependence. Breaking free demands awareness and courage. The first step is recognizing the loop, the pattern of setup, failure, and rescue. Once identified, you can start to question the reality of your failures. Were the conditions fair? Were the expectations reasonable? Are you being set up, or is this a genuine challenge? Rebuilding trust in yourself involves small victories. Choose tasks where you can succeed and celebrate those wins. Surround yourself with supportive people who encourage autonomy, not dependence. Seek environments that nurture growth rather than exploit vulnerability. It also means setting boundaries with those who use this loop. Decline unsolicited help when you feel capable, and insist on clear conditions and support when you take on new challenges. Reclaiming your agency is a process of asserting your right to try, fail, and succeed on your own terms. Remember, failure is a natural part of learning, not a verdict on your worth or ability. The control by failure loop twists failure into a tool of control, but you can untangle yourself by reframing failure as growth. Each attempt, regardless of outcome, is a step toward empowerment. In the end, your hands hold the power to shape your path. When you stop surrendering control after setbacks and insist on standing up again, you break the loop. Their help loses its leverage because your trust in yourself becomes the strongest foundation you have. You are not broken, you are learning, and in learning, you reclaim your freedom. The hope flicker trap. They give you just enough hope to stay. One good day, one tender look. You tell yourself it's getting better. It never is. This is the hope flicker trap, a cruel dance of light and shadow that ensnares your heart and mind in a cycle of yearning and disappointment. It's a psychological pattern designed to keep you tethered to a situation, relationship, or dream that slowly drains you, disguised as promise and possibility. Imagine a flame flickering in a dark room. It's not steady, not bright, but it offers just enough warmth and light to keep you near. That flicker becomes a lifeline, a reason to endure the cold emptiness around you. You cling to it, believing that with time, the flame will grow, that the darkness will recede. But the flicker fades and returns, never steady, never fulfilling its promise. This trap preys on our fundamental need for hope, the belief that things can improve, that pain will ease, that connection will deepen. Hope is essential for resilience, for survival. But when hope is weaponized as a flicker, intermittent and unreliable, it becomes a form of manipulation, a tether that binds you to uncertainty and emotional turmoil. Why does the hope flicker trap grip so tightly? Because it exploits our brain's reward system. Occasional positive experiences release dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation. These rare moments create powerful reinforcement, making us seek more despite the overall negative pattern. The unpredictable rewards hook us, just like a gambler chasing a win that never comes. This dynamic is common in abusive relationships, toxic friendships, dysfunctional workplaces, and any situation where control is exerted through intermittent kindness or success. The one good day or tender look serves as a reset button, rekindling hope and silencing doubts. You tell yourself, maybe this time is different. But patterns repeat, pain returns, and hope flickers out again. The emotional toll is immense. The cycle breeds confusion, self-blame, and emotional exhaustion. You become trapped in a loop of hope and despair, unable to break free because the promise of better days keeps pulling you back. Over time, this erodes self-esteem, distorts reality, and damages trust in yourself and others. Neurologically, the brain's limbic system, the amygdala and hippocampus, registers the emotional highs and lows intensely. The unpredictability creates heightened stress responses, flooding the body with cortisol, while the brief positive spikes trigger dopamine surges. This neurochemical roller coaster destabilizes emotional regulation, making it harder to make clear decisions. Breaking free from the hope flicker trap begins with recognizing the pattern. This psychological entrapment leverages guilt, fear, and the longing for belonging to maintain control. The belief hijack effect preys on our deepest human needs, to find meaning, to belong, and to live according to values larger than ourselves. Manipulators exploit this yearning by presenting themselves as the only true interpreters of those values, demanding absolute loyalty in exchange for spiritual or ideological security. The more one invests in the sacred narrative, the harder it becomes to question or break free without feeling lost or damned. Psychologically, this manipulation fractures the self. It creates cognitive dissonance between personal truth and imposed doctrine. Victims often struggle with feelings of confusion, guilt, and shame, as their innate sense of justice conflicts with the distorted version forced upon them. Their identity becomes entangled with obedience, their freedom sacrificed at the altar of manipulated belief. Breaking free from the belief hijack effect is among the most difficult battles one can face. It demands profound courage to disentangle one's spirituality or cause from the manipulator's twisted version. It requires reclaiming the right to question sacred teachings, to embrace doubt as part of faith, and to redefine loyalty as something that honors integrity rather than submission. Recovery involves reconnecting with the authentic roots of belief, those personal experiences, reflections, and values that originally inspired faith or commitment. It means seeking support from others who honor autonomy and diversity of thought. It demands patience, compassion toward oneself, and a willingness to face isolation or rejection from those still caught in the hijack. Ultimately, the belief hijack effect reveals the terrifying power of manipulation when it invades what we hold most sacred. It warns us to vigilantly protect the sanctity of our beliefs, ensuring they remain sanctuaries of truth, not prisons of control. True faith or justice does not demand blind obedience, but invites honest questioning, compassionate dialogue, and freedom. To live beyond the hijack is to embrace a faith or cause that empowers rather than enslaves, that nourishes the spirit without extinguishing the self. It is a journey from bondage to liberation, a reclaiming of sacredness that honors both conviction and freedom. Remember, the deepest betrayal is not leaving a belief, but surrendering it to those who twist it for their own gain. The path to freedom lies in reclaiming what is truly sacred, your right to believe, to doubt, and to live authentically. The rehearsed vulnerability trick. They cry on cue, bleed just enough pain to earn your compassion, but it's a performance. You're the audience and the target. This is the rehearsed vulnerability trick, a manipulation so artful it blurs the lines between genuine emotion and calculated deceit. It exploits your empathy, your desire to nurture and heal, turning your compassion into a weapon against you. At first, their tears and pain feel authentic. The quiver in their voice, the sadness in their eyes, the rawness of their expression. Each detail is perfectly timed to draw you in, to disarm your defenses. But beneath this facade lies a scripted act designed to control your response, to soften your boundaries, and to make you question your own judgment. The vulnerability is rehearsed, polished, and used like a scalpel to carve out your trust. This trick plays on the human instinct to respond to suffering with kindness. We are wired to protect and comfort those who appear vulnerable, seeing their pain as a call for connection. When someone weaponizes vulnerability, they hijack this instinct, flipping your care into compliance. Your empathy becomes a leash, pulling you closer into their orbit of control. The performance is precise. They reveal just enough wounds to provoke sympathy, but hold back enough to remain in control. The cycle often repeats, a display of fragility, followed by demands or manipulative requests, then another vulnerable moment to reset the emotional stakes. Each act deepens your investment, making it harder to see the manipulation behind the tears. Real-life examples show up in toxic relationships, workplace dynamics, and even friendships. A partner who cries after pushing your boundaries, shifting blame onto you with their pain. A colleague who breaks down just enough to avoid accountability, turning the team's concern into a shield. A friend who reveals hurt feelings selectively, weaponizing sympathy to get their way. In each case, vulnerability is not a genuine call for help, but a strategic tool. This manipulation confuses your emotional compass. You start to doubt your own perceptions, wondering if you are the heartless one for resisting or questioning their pain. The line between authentic care and enabling toxic behavior blurs. You become trapped in a cycle of guilt, compassion, and control. Breaking free from the rehearsed vulnerability trick requires reclaiming your discernment, learning to recognize when vulnerability is genuine and when it's performed. This doesn't mean becoming cold or unfeeling, but developing the strength to hold empathy without losing clarity. It means setting boundaries even when compassion feels natural and protecting your emotional well-being without abandoning kindness. It also involves seeking perspective from trusted others who can help you see patterns invisible from inside the performance. Genuine vulnerability invites support without strings. Performed vulnerability demands control disguised as need. Understanding this trick is a step toward emotional liberation. It reveals how easily kindness can be manipulated and how vital it is to balance empathy with self-respect. Your compassion is a gift, not a weakness to be exploited. When you recognize the performance, you reclaim your power, choosing connection without surrender. The rehearsed vulnerability trick is a reminder that not all tears are truth, and that true empathy honors both vulnerability and boundaries. By seeing beyond the act, you protect your heart and preserve the integrity of your care, ensuring it nourishes rather than feeds manipulation. The praise-withdrawal game, they shower you with love, intense, overwhelming, almost intoxicating. Words of affection, gestures of kindness, moments where you feel seen and valued beyond measure. This flood of praise is not random, it's carefully calculated, designed to ignite a craving deep within you. You bask in the warmth, your heart swelling with hope and belonging. But then, just as suddenly as it came, the love recedes. Silence. Withdrawal. The space where praise once filled now feels hollow and cold. This is the beginning of the praise-withdrawal game, a cycle that traps you in a dangerous dance of longing and obedience. The highs of affection become like a drug you desperately chase, an addictive rush that you crave again and again. Each silence is unbearable, a void that echoes with the memory of what was and the hope of what might return. You wait, you watch, you spiral. In this void, your mind becomes a battlefield. You replay every moment, every compliment, searching for clues. Were you good enough? Did you say the right thing? Were you worthy of that praise? The answers feel elusive. The craving grows stronger. You begin to tailor your behavior, your words, your very self, to recapture that fleeting approval. Obedience is not commanded but volunteered, driven by the desperate need to feel that warmth once more. This cycle is intensely destabilizing. The sudden withdrawal of praise triggers stress responses in the brain, similar to withdrawal from substances. Dopamine spikes during the flood, then crashes during silence, leaving you anxious, restless, and desperate for relief. This biochemical roller coaster hijacks your emotional regulation, making you vulnerable to further manipulation. The praise-withdrawal game often appears in toxic relationships and manipulative dynamics. Partners, friends, or authority figures wield affection like a weapon, dishing it out generously to secure loyalty, then withholding it to punish or control. The unpredictability keeps you off balance, locked in a state of hypervigilance and emotional dependence. This manipulation extends beyond personal relationships. Social media, workplace recognition, and even cultural validation can mimic the praise-withdrawal cycle. Likes, comments, promotions, given and withdrawn, condition behavior and self-esteem, creating an endless loop of craving and submission. Breaking free requires awareness of the pattern and a reclaiming of self-worth, independent of external validation. It means recognizing that love and approval should not be tools for control, but gifts freely given and received. It means building emotional resilience, setting boundaries, and seeking genuine connections that nourish rather than manipulate. The praise-withdrawal game is a silent, insidious trap. It uses the language of love to chain you to cycles of craving and obedience. But freedom lies in understanding, in choosing to walk away from the addictive highs and the painful crashes, and in embracing a love that is steady, unconditional, and true. The Dependency Installation. They step in with answers, quick solutions, and comforting fixes for every problem you face. At first, it feels like relief, a helpful hand guiding you through the chaos. But gradually, this constant solving becomes a quiet cage. This is the reality of the Dependency Installation, a subtle but powerful process where autonomy is dismantled piece by piece until you no longer trust your own judgment. Imagine waking each day with a growing uncertainty, a hesitance so deep it touches even the simplest acts: what to eat, what to wear, how to respond. Decisions that once flowed naturally now feel like insurmountable hurdles, requiring permission, approval, or guidance. Your own inner compass dims beneath the steady light of someone else's choices. Dependency installation isn't merely about helping. It's about taking over. seizing control under the guise of care. By solving every little problem, they quietly strip away your skills, confidence, and sense of agency. You begin to doubt your ability to navigate life without their intervention. This learned helplessness tightens its grip with each act of over-assistance. Psychologically, this process exploits fundamental human needs for safety and certainty. When faced with overwhelming complexity, the mind craves clear guidance. The installer offers this clarity, becoming an indispensable source of direction. But in doing so, they create a psychological reliance so strong that independent action feels risky, even impossible. Real-life examples are common in relationships where one partner gradually takes over responsibilities, from financial decisions to social interactions, making the other feel incapable and incomplete alone. Parents who micromanage every aspect of their child's life can inadvertently instill this dependence, leaving the child ill-equipped to handle adulthood. In workplaces, managers who fix every problem instead of empowering their team can foster similar patterns of reliance and disempowerment. The impact on identity and self-worth is profound. Without practice and trust in your own decisions, your confidence erodes. You may feel lost, anxious, and powerless, questioning even basic instincts. Your voice quiets as you internalize the belief that your choices are inferior or dangerous. The freedom to live authentically slips away, replaced by a script written and directed by someone else. Breaking the cycle of dependency installation requires deliberate effort and courage. It begins with reclaiming small decisions, choosing what to wear, what to eat, how to spend your time, building confidence through practice. Setting boundaries around unsolicited help is essential, gently but firmly asserting your right to autonomy. Seeking support from those who encourage growth rather than control can restore trust in yourself. Therapeutic approaches that focus on empowerment, skill building, and self-trust are invaluable. Mindfulness and self-reflection help reconnect with your inner voice, illuminating the difference between guidance and control. Healing from dependency means embracing uncertainty and imperfection as part of authentic living. The dependency installation reveals how care can be weaponized into control, how help can become harm when it erodes the very skills it aims to protect. Yet, it also points to the resilience within us, the capacity to relearn freedom, reclaim decision-making, and breathe life into choices that are truly our own. Remember, no one should decide for you what it means to live. Your life is your own. Every breath, every choice is a declaration of your autonomy. Guard it fiercely, nurture it wisely, and resist any force that seeks to install dependency beneath the mask of help. The Gaslight-by-Logic Tactic. They begin calmly, cloaked in reason and clarity. Let's be rational, they say, inviting you to a conversation that seems fair, balanced, and grounded in facts. But beneath this veneer of logic lies a calculated tactic designed to dismantle your very experience. This is the Gaslight-by-Logic Tactic, a subtle war on your feelings, where emotion is invalidated by cold, unyielding reason. Your feelings are complex, nuanced, and deeply personal. They reflect your internal reality, your perceptions, your pain, and your hopes. When someone uses logic to disprove these feelings, they create a chasm between what you know inside and what you are allowed to express. Your emotional truth begins to sound like nonsense in the face of their bulletproof arguments. Imagine sharing your hurt after a disagreement, only to be met with facts that twist your story. That never happened, they say, or even if it did, it's not as bad as you think. Their logic feels unassailable because it is constructed from selective truths, omissions, and rigid interpretations designed to silence you. You start to doubt your memory, your perspective, your sanity. This tactic exploits the deep human desire for coherence and order. Rationality is prized in society. It's the language of power and credibility. When your feelings are painted as irrational, you feel exposed and vulnerable. You begin to defer to their version of reality, surrendering your truth to their logic. The Gaslight-by-Logic tactic is particularly insidious because it masquerades as reasoned debate or conflict resolution. It masks emotional abuse under intellectual dominance. The abuser's calm, composed demeanor makes the attack feel less like aggression and more like enlightenment. Except the enlightenment is a carefully constructed illusion. Consider an example. You express sadness about being excluded from a group event. They respond with a series of logical points about scheduling conflicts and misunderstandings, concluding, your feelings are just your insecurity talking. Their logic invalidates your pain, shifting the burden of proof onto you to justify your feelings. Over time, you learn to silence yourself rather than defend what feels true. Psychologically, this tactic deepens confusion and self-doubt. It attacks the foundation of emotional validation, the simple truth that your feelings matter. When feelings are repeatedly invalidated by logic, you start to believe your emotional responses are flawed, leading to emotional suppression and fragmentation of self. Breaking free from this tactic requires reclaiming the value of your emotions alongside logic. Emotions are not opposites of reason. They are vital data points that inform your understanding of reality. Your feelings provide insight into your needs, boundaries, and values. Honoring them does not mean abandoning reason. It means integrating both for a fuller picture. Practice naming your feelings clearly, without apology. When faced with dismissive logic, assert that your emotions are real and valid, even if they don't fit neatly into someone else's rational framework. Seek relationships and environments where emotional honesty is respected as much as intellectual rigor. Therapy and support groups can be powerful tools in rebuilding trust in your feelings. They offer spaces where your emotional truth is heard without judgment or logical dismissal. This validation is essential for healing the damage caused by gaslight-by-logic. Remember, logic can be twisted, facts can be selected or omitted, but your feelings remain authentic. They are the pulse of your inner world, the compass guiding you through relationships and life's complexities. In the end, you don't have to choose between reason and emotion. Both coexist within you, shaping your reality. The gaslight-by-logic tactic tries to silence one to control the other. Reclaim your voice by honoring your feelings as truths that deserve space, respect, and acknowledgement. Your truth is not nonsense. It is the foundation of your authentic self. Stand firm in it, even when faced with the coldest logic, because your feelings are real and they matter. The reputation sabotage loop. They smear you before you leave, quietly, subtly. So if you ever speak out, no one believes you. You're already discredited in advance. This is the reputation sabotage loop, a vicious cycle of silent character assassination designed to strip you of credibility before you even have a chance to defend yourself. It's a preemptive strike, a strategic undermining that erodes your voice, isolates you, and ensures your truth falls on deaf ears. Imagine working tirelessly, investing your time, energy, and heart into a relationship, a job, or a community. When the time comes to part ways, whether by choice or circumstance, the other party launches a covert campaign, not with loud accusations or public confrontations, but with whispered insinuations, half-truths, and subtle doubts. The goal is clear: to tarnish your reputation so thoroughly that your words become worthless. This sabotage often happens in the shadows. Gossip seeded carefully among trusted circles, misleading narratives woven into conversations. Your intentions questioned, your character twisted. It's a slow poison that undermines your social capital and credibility before you even realize it's happening. Why is this so effective? Because human nature leans toward skepticism of those labeled as untrustworthy. When doubt precedes your claims, your voice is drowned out by the very doubts planted. Even your closest allies may hesitate, uncertain of what to believe. The sabotage isolates you emotionally and socially, stripping away support and protection. The psychological impact is profound. Victims often feel helpless, frustrated, and deeply wounded. They may second-guess their own memories, their self-worth shattered by the cloud cast over their name. This internalized damage adds to the external obstacles, creating a loop that's hard to break. In workplaces, this tactic is a common weapon in toxic environments. An employee planning to leave may find rumors circulating about their competence or loyalty. In personal relationships, a partner ending a connection might subtly paint you as unstable or unreasonable, disarming your attempts to explain or seek closure. Neurologically, chronic stress from social rejection and betrayal activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, flooding the body with stress hormones like cortisol. This impacts emotional regulation, memory, and cognitive function, making it harder to respond effectively or maintain resilience. Breaking free from the reputation sabotage loop begins with reclaiming your narrative. Document your experiences, seek out trustworthy allies, and build new support networks that know your true character. Transparency and consistency in your actions become your strongest defense. Legal or professional recourse may be necessary in severe cases, but emotional recovery is equally crucial. Therapy can help rebuild self-esteem and counteract internalized doubts. Strengthening your identity apart from the sabotaged image empowers you to move forward. Examples abound. A whistleblower discredited before exposing wrongdoing, an employee vilified to prevent future employment, a friend disparaged to sabotage their social standing. In all, the sabotage serves to silence and control. Recognizing this loop is the first step toward dismantling it. Awareness allows you to separate truth from manipulation and to refuse the isolation imposed upon you. Your reputation is built over time through your actions, integrity, and relationships. No covert campaign can erase your true character unless you allow it to define you. The reputation sabotage loop thrives in silence and doubt, but falters in the light of truth and resilience. Stand firm, speak clearly, and surround yourself with those who know your worth. Your voice matters. Your story deserves to be heard. Refuse to be discredited before you speak. The nurture to own process. They care for you, deeply, intensely, but every favor becomes a ledger. You're not loved, you're indebted. Loved people don't feel this trapped. This is the core of the nurture to own process. A manipulative dynamic cloaked in the language of care and support, but rooted in control and ownership. At first, their attention feels like a sanctuary, a refuge from loneliness, a balm for your wounds. They offer help, kindness, and presence with such intensity that it feels like genuine love. But beneath this nurturing surface lies a carefully constructed system of obligation. Each act of care is silently recorded, a debit in an unspoken ledger that binds you tighter and tighter to their will. This process transforms nurturing into a transaction. You begin to sense that every kindness carries an invisible price tag, a favor owed, a debt incurred. The warmth that should nourish your soul starts to feel like chains around your freedom. The more they give, the more they expect, and the more you feel trapped in a cycle of repayment that has no end. The nurture to own process exploits a fundamental human truth. We are wired to reciprocate care. When someone helps us, our brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals that foster trust and bonding. This neurochemical response can blind us to the manipulative intent behind the nurturing, making it difficult to see the ledger growing beneath the surface. This dynamic often unfolds in families, friendships, and romantic relationships. A parent who insists on helping, only to later remind you of sacrifices made. A partner who showers you with care, but then wields it as leverage during conflicts. A friend whose support feels conditional, slipping into resentment when you fail to pay back their generosity. In each case, care becomes a weapon, and love is replaced by ownership. The psychological weight of this process is immense. You may feel guilt or shame for wanting autonomy or setting boundaries because it seems to contradict the care you've received. You might question your own feelings, wondering if resistance makes you ungrateful or cold. This internal conflict deepens your sense of entrapment. Breaking free from the nurture to own process means recognizing that true love and care are freely given, not bartered or held hostage. It requires reclaiming your right to receive support without strings and to assert your needs without guilt. This shift often demands courage, especially when the nurturer resists losing their leverage. Healing from this dynamic also involves redefining what care means for you. Embracing relationships where kindness is balanced with respect, and support is offered without expectation of repayment. It means building connections where you are valued as a whole person, not as a debtor or project. Understanding the nurture to own process is a crucial step toward emotional freedom. It unveils how the language of care can mask control and how important it is to discern genuine love from transactional nurturing. You deserve relationships that uplift without ensnaring, love that empowers without owning. In reclaiming your autonomy, you honor both yourself and the true spirit of care, where nurturing is a gift, not a ledger, where love is liberation, not ownership. This realization is the key to breaking the cycle and stepping into relationships rooted in mutual respect, freedom, and authentic connection. The belief hijack effect. They don't announce themselves as enemies. Instead, they approach softly, weaving into the very core of what you hold sacred: your God, your cause, your unwavering sense of justice. They do not oppose your beliefs openly. They become part of them. This is the belief hijack effect, a silent, insidious manipulation where your deepest convictions are commandeered and twisted until the line between faith and control blurs beyond recognition. What once was a beacon of truth becomes a cage that imprisons your freedom. Imagine your belief system as a sacred temple built over years of experience, study, and spiritual reflection. This temple is your anchor in a chaotic world, your source of meaning, and the foundation of your identity. Now, picture an intruder who does not break down the doors, but quietly moves in, rearranging the altar, rewriting the scriptures, and installing their own idols within the sacred halls. This is how the hijack begins, not with violence, but with subtle distortion, a quiet erosion of authenticity cloaked in the language of devotion. They attach themselves so seamlessly that their voice becomes indistinguishable from your own inner guidance. They claim to protect your God, to advance your cause, to uphold justice. Yet, their actions and interpretations serve a hidden agenda. Slowly, imperceptibly, they rewrite what is right and wrong, what is loyal and what is betrayal. They redefine sacrifice as obedience, questioning as sin, and departure as heresy. Leaving them is no longer a personal choice. It becomes an act of sacrilege, a betrayal of something sacred that you dare not contemplate. Consider historical examples where this effect devastated communities. Cult leaders have mastered this technique by cloaking their authority in spiritual dogma. Followers who once sought enlightenment find themselves trapped in a maze of control, their doubts labeled as weaknesses, their dissent framed as attacks on divine will. The fear of betraying their sacred cause silences their inner voice and binds them ever tighter to the manipulator's will. On a political level, authoritarian regimes use the belief hijack effect to intertwine loyalty to the state with national identity and moral righteousness. Citizens are taught that questioning leadership is not just dissent, but betrayal of the nation's soul. This fusion of power and sacredness turns governance into a religion and loyalty into a sacred duty, making resistance feel like blasphemy. On a personal scale, families or social groups may weaponize shared beliefs to enforce conformity. When a member attempts to leave or challenge group norms, they face accusations of betraying not only people, but the foundational principles that bind the group. This psychological entrapment leverages guilt, fear, and the longing for belonging to maintain control. The belief hijack effect preys on our deepest human needs, to find meaning, to belong, and to live according to values larger than ourselves. Manipulators exploit this yearning by presenting themselves as the only true interpreters of those values, demanding absolute loyalty in exchange for spiritual or ideological security. The more one invests in the sacred narrative, the harder it becomes to question or break free without feeling lost or damned. Psychologically, this manipulation fractures the self. It creates cognitive dissonance between personal truth and imposed doctrine. Victims often struggle with feelings of confusion, guilt, and shame, as their innate sense of justice conflicts with the distorted version forced upon them. Their identity becomes entangled with obedience, their freedom sacrificed at the altar of manipulated belief. Breaking free from the belief hijack effect is among the most difficult battles one can face. It demands profound courage to disentangle one's spirituality or cause from the manipulator's twisted version. It requires reclaiming the right to question sacred teachings, to embrace doubt as part of faith, and to redefine loyalty as something that honors integrity rather than submission. Recovery involves reconnecting with the authentic roots of belief, those personal experiences, reflections, and values that originally inspired faith or commitment. It means seeking support from others who honor autonomy and diversity of thought. It demands patience, compassion toward oneself, and a willingness to face isolation or rejection from those still caught in the hijack. Ultimately, the belief hijack effect reveals the terrifying power of manipulation when it invades what we hold most sacred. It warns us to vigilantly protect the sanctity of our beliefs, ensuring they remain sanctuaries of truth, not prisons of control. True faith or justice does not demand blind obedience, but invites honest questioning, compassionate dialogue, and freedom. To live beyond the hijack is to embrace a faith or cause that empowers rather than enslaves, that nourishes the spirit without extinguishing the self. It is a journey from bondage to liberation, a reclaiming of sacredness that honors both conviction and freedom. Remember, The deepest betrayal is not leaving a belief, but surrendering it to those who twist it for their own gain. The path to freedom lies in reclaiming what is truly sacred: your right to believe, to doubt, and to live authentically. The apology confusion loop. They say sorry with trembling lips, with eyes glistening and voices thick with regret. The words come so beautifully, so sincerely, that your heart softens and hope flickers anew. You want to believe in change, in growth, in redemption. But deep down, nothing shifts. The hurt remains, the patterns repeat, and you find yourself caught in the apology confusion loop, a cycle where apology is mistaken for transformation, and forgiveness becomes the trap that binds you. This loop begins with a powerful illusion. An apology, delivered with emotion and eloquence, promises renewal. It asks you to release your pain, to let go of anger, to believe that the past will not repeat. You want to believe because holding on to resentment is heavy, and the prospect of healing feels like a lifeline. Yet, beneath the surface, the apology is a well-rehearsed act, a tool to pause accountability, to soothe your doubts, and to keep you tethered. The danger lies in equating apology with real change. Words alone cannot undo the damage done, nor can they erase the behaviors that caused it. True transformation demands consistent action over time, a rebuilding of trust through respect, empathy, and altered behavior. But in the apology confusion loop, the cycle restarts before genuine repair can begin. Psychologically, this dynamic exploits our deep craving for resolution and connection. When we receive an apology, our brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, triggering feelings of safety and attachment. This neurochemical reward can cloud judgment, making it harder to see that patterns persist unchanged. The emotional rush of forgiveness can dull the pain temporarily, but it does not fix the root problem. Real-life examples are heartbreaking. In abusive or toxic relationships, apologies are often scripted performances. Tearful, passionate, and promising change, only to precede repeated harm. The victim clings to these moments of remorse, believing that each apology signals a turning point. But the cycle loops endlessly, fostering confusion, despair, and a fractured sense of self. The loop also distorts self-trust. You may question your own perception, wondering if you are too harsh, too unforgiving, or simply misreading the signs. The apology becomes a weapon that undermines your boundaries, making you doubt your need for safety and respect. Breaking free from the apology confusion loop requires clarity and courage. It means recognizing that words are not enough, that transformation is measured in sustained change, not fleeting emotion. Setting firm boundaries around what behavior you will accept is crucial. Demanding accountability through actions rather than promises protects your well-being. Therapeutic support can help unravel the emotional entanglement created by this loop. It fosters rebuilding trust in yourself, validating your experiences, and cultivating resilience. Healing is not about denying the power of apology, but about discerning its true meaning and refusing to be trapped by it. The apology confusion loop reveals how vulnerability can be exploited, how hope can be weaponized, and how love can be entangled with control. Yet, it also points toward liberation. When you learn to honor your pain, demand genuine change, and reclaim your right to safety beyond mere words. Remember, a beautiful apology without transformation is not redemption. It is the trap. Guard your heart. Trust your instincts and seek freedom through actions that speak louder than sorrowful words. The reward-punishment ratio. They don't just alternate between kindness and cruelty by chance. Every act of warmth, every soft word is carefully timed and calibrated, designed not to nurture love, but to enforce control. This is the reward-punishment ratio, a precise balance of giving and taking away, of reward and punishment that shapes your mind like a leash, tightening with each cycle. At first, the kindness feels like a lifeline, a rare oasis in a desert of uncertainty. It releases dopamine in your brain, flooding you with fleeting pleasure and hope. You begin to crave these moments, waiting anxiously for the next smile, the next gentle touch, the next reassuring word. But this reward is never steady or guaranteed. It flickers unpredictably, making you chase it like a flickering flame in a dark room. Then the cruelty arrives, sudden, sharp, calculated. It may be harsh words, cold silences, dismissive glances, or subtle insults. The punishment is measured, enough to hurt, but never so much as to destroy. It leaves you off balance, confused, and desperate to restore the fragile connection. This alternating cycle of kindness and cruelty hooks your mind, creating a powerful emotional dependency. You're not in love. You're conditioned. The nervous system adapts, rewiring itself to seek reward and avoid punishment. This intermittent reinforcement creates a powerful behavioral loop. You keep trying harder, hoping for more reward, fearful of the next punishment. Your autonomy shrinks. Your boundaries blur, and the leash tightens invisibly. Psychologists have long studied this pattern, known as intermittent reinforcement, which produces the most persistent and resistant behaviors. It's the mechanism behind gambling addiction, and in relationships, it's weaponized to maintain control. The unpredictability of reward keeps you hooked, anxious, and off balance. In abusive relationships, the reward-punishment ratio is a hidden weapon. A partner may shower you with affection one day, then withdraw love or lash out the next. This inconsistency causes hypervigilance. You become constantly alert, scanning for signs of approval or rejection, trapped in a cycle of hope and fear. Over time, this cycle distorts your sense of what healthy love looks like. You may start to accept emotional volatility as normal, confusing manipulation for affection. You tolerate pain for the chance of reward, forgetting your worth and ignoring your needs. Breaking free requires understanding the cycle and reclaiming your power. Real love is consistent, respectful, and nurturing, not a roller coaster of reward and punishment. Healing means rebuilding trust in yourself and learning to expect steadiness and kindness without strings. You can rewire your brain to resist the pull of intermittent reinforcement through mindfulness, therapy, and support. Recognizing the pattern is the first step to stepping off the leash. You deserve relationships that nourish, not control, that uplift, not confuse. The reward-punishment ratio is a leash forged from your own hope and fear, but you hold the key to break free. Demand love that liberates, not conditions. When you do, you reclaim your freedom, your dignity, and your self-worth.